Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Dan Gorodnick. I'm the chair of the City Planning Commission. Welcome to today's review session of June 6, 2022. If this is your first time with us, today is a public review session for the commissioners of the City Planning Commission, where the staff of the Department of City Planning, briefs commissioners on applications that are about to begin the city's land use review process, also known as ULURP, or applications that are coming to us for a public hearing on Wednesday. Most projects starting public review today are for new homes, new jobs, or both, near transit, providing opportunities to New Yorkers and also reducing our reliance on cars. Before we get to the city projects today, that we're going to be hearing, we're going to hear from city planning staff about a new requirement as of June 1 for significant land use applications entering public review. These projects now require what is called a racial equity report. This racial equity report will provide data and a narrative on how a project relates to the city's goals of fair housing and equitable access to opportunities. We will welcome Lara Merida and Howard Slatkin to share details about racial equity reports in just a few moments. And one proposal on the calendar for today at 280 Bergen Street in Boerum Hill, Brooklyn, includes the first ever racial equity report before the City Planning Commission. This 4-building development aims to bring 300 homes, 90 of them affordable, retail, and more to this jobs-rich area near the Atlantic Avenue Barclays Transit Hub that also includes a subway and the Long Island Railroad. Also on the agenda today in Long Island City, Queens, at 2501 Queens Plaza North, we have a project looking to create over 400 homes, around 120 of them affordable with retail and bike parking. This project is notable because it will bring ADA access to Queensboro Plaza for the first time, a tangible good for this community. And it is thanks to Zoning for Accessibility, which is an initiative developed by the city with the MTA that leverages private development to achieve a more accessible transit system faster. This is the first use of this zoning measure outside of Manhattan. Through elevators and other improvements, New Yorkers with disabilities, parents with young children, seniors may gain easier access to the NWN7 trains. City Planning Commission today will also hear about plans to create an automobile sales showroom in Woodside, which would create around 10 jobs and include electric vehicle charging stations. And it will include a proposal in Corona for a new residential building that will also upgrade a supermarket that has long served the Lefrak city community. And finally, in Hell's Kitchen, Manhattan, we will discuss renewals of special permits for Piers 92 and 94 on the Hudson River to allow for the operation of trade show spaces and TV film studios at the piers and create new open space for the public. So that's more than enough as an intro. I'm going to turn to Ryan Singer as we get started for today's review session. Thanks to all the commissioners for joining us today.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, and I will note that this is the New York City Planning Commission review session for Monday, June 6, 2022. The time is 1:04 p.m. and a quorum is present. Before we begin our regular agenda, Lara Merida and Howard Slatkin will give us a presentation regarding the new racial equity report. Howard, Lara.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Chair Gorodnick. And good afternoon, Chair Commissioners. My name is Lara Merida. I am Director of Neighborhood Studies at DCP, and I am delighted to be here today with my colleague Howard Slatkin, Deputy Executive Director at DCP, as well as Michael Sandler, Assistant Commissioner of Neighborhood Development and Stabilization at HPD. Next slide, please. We are here representing a big team of DCP and HPD staff who have been working jointly with stakeholders on developing an exciting new tool, the Equitable Development Data Explorer. It is an interactive resource that equips New Yorkers with data to navigate challenging conversations about affordable housing, development, and racial equity in our city. The Explorer stems from two major efforts to empower New Yorkers with a critical tool to see data related to racial equity. For starters, Where We Live, the city's Fair Housing Plan, outlines the necessity to provide more comprehensive public data on housing and demographics to center racial equity in the planning and policy conversations and decisions. Additionally, coming out of advocacy and leadership by the Racial Impact Study Coalition and public advocate Jumaane Williams, Local Law 78 was passed in June 2021. It required the creation of equitable data development tool that has a wide variety of data broken down by race and ethnicity available at the neighborhood, borough, and citywide scales. It also required a racial equity reports on housing and opportunity that will be submitted alongside certain land use applications. Next slide, please. The Explorer brings together data related to housing conditions, demographics, and quality of life, showing change over time over the last 20 years. So New Yorkers can see the shifting demographics and housing patterns in New York City. A key piece of the tool, as required by the legislation, is the Displacement Risk Index, also known as the DRI. The DRI is a map of the city that illustrates the level of risk in different neighborhoods that residents face of being unable to remain in their homes or neighborhoods. The tool also produces the demographic data necessary for the racial equity reports on housing and opportunity. These reports are disclosure documents required for land use applications, certain land use applications entering the public review process after June 1st, 2022. Racial equity reports inform the land use process by providing context to support discussions of race and equity in planning. We will go through those components in more details with you today. Next slide. The Explorer encompasses a lot of data and information, but the main goal is to serve as a resource for providing context for discussions around race and equity in planning, increase data transparency, facilitate discourse around neighborhood change, and as a tool for local stakeholders to lead conversations about changes in their communities and advocate for their planning priorities. Next slide. Since the legislation passed in June 2021, we have been working with an interagency team to advance development of this Explorer. In under a year, we were able to launch the Explorer this past April. We could not have gotten to this point without the working sessions with the Racial Impact Study Coalitions and the public review sessions, which we held during the week and on the weekends. As of June 1st, we have released the Racial Equity Reports on Housing and Opportunity Requirement Form and Guidance. I'm now going to hand it over to my colleague Howard to walk you through the components of the Explorer and the Racial Equity Reports in more detail.
Thank you, Lara. Next slide, please. And again, the next slide, thanks. So the Equitable Development Data Explorer is the data resource, the public data tool on which the racial equity report requirement is based. The tool itself is one of many that the department makes available for the public to provide data analysis and context for discussing issues including race and equity in the process. But this data tool is really intended as much as possible a kind of one-stop shop for the information at the local, borough, and citywide level on these issues, and trying to take each of the indicators wherever possible within the limitations of the data, and breaking out differences by race and ethnicity wherever possible. The categories of data in the Explorer are, of course, demographics, indicators of household economic security, indicators related to the housing itself, housing security, affordability, and quality, housing production in terms of being able to describe changes in the housing supply within the area and in the broader context, and And finally, indicators related to neighborhood quality of life and access to opportunity. There is also a displacement risk index, which I will touch on in a little more detail in just a moment, that was specifically a provision of the legislation that we have worked hard with on an interagency basis and with external stakeholders to construct in order to help inform this process. And this tool is really the basis for the requirement for racial equity reports, as well as a resource more generally at the citywide level. Next slide, please. The displacement risk index, as I mentioned, is something that is required under the legislation, and we've tried to make this information as accessible as possible within the framework of the Equitable Development Data Explorer. As Lara mentioned, it is a map that shows citywide how neighborhoods rank or rate along this scale of the displacement risk index, and it's built out of 3 buckets of indicators that we understand to be contributors to the vulnerability of a household to displacement, or the inability to remain within their home, their current home, or their neighborhood, should they so choose. So the index is based first on population vulnerability indicators. These are characteristics of the household itself. For instance, income level, population that is neither white nor Hispanic, population with limited English proficiency, all of which we have categorized as factors that potentially increase displacement risk. Then there are housing conditions, characteristics of the housing itself, such as maintenance deficiencies, regulation status of housing units, and the tenure of units, such as the portion of the housing stock that is rental versus ownership. And then finally, the third bucket of indicators is market pressure, which reflects what's going on in the environment outside of the individual building or housing unit. Things like indicators such as the price appreciation of repeat sales within the area, what's going on with housing prices, changes in rents, and other relevant indicators. The displacement risk index is not predictive. There is no consensus methodology for predicting when displacement is going to occur, but it is our effort to present a genuine assessment of what we think, in a relative sense, the level of displacement risk is within a neighborhood. Next slide, please. So the racial equity report itself draws upon the content of the Equitable Development Data Explorer, including the displacement risk index. Next slide, please. Under the legislation, there are categories of applications that are required to file a racial equity report. This is generally larger zoning changes that are related to producing residential development or non-residential development. Generally, the threshold is over 50,000 square feet of residential or 200,000 square feet of non-residential. The specific thresholds are spelled out in detail in the legislation. And the applications that have such a requirement, for those applications, the applicant is required to file one of these at the time of their that they begin public review. Next slide, please. So we are here in the on the day where we have the first projects with racial equity report beginning the public review process. The applicant drafts that racial equity report using the tools that we provide for them on our website. And I'll just note a couple of things about the racial equity report. One is that it is separate from the land use application itself. It's sort of a parallel requirement to the land use process itself. The information in the racial equity report pertains to the proposed project, what the applicant is seeking to build or do, and not the specifics of the land use actions themselves. It's not about the zoning map change per se, for instance, but what the applicant intends to build and is describing under the terms of the legislation. The racial equity report itself does not include any prediction, determination, or findings. This is the applicant's characterization of the project. They describe characteristics of the project. They use our data to describe characteristics of the neighborhood. and they provide a narrative that describes the relationship of the project to the city's fair housing goals and strategies as described in the city's fair housing plan. The intent is that these reports are a resource to inform the public review process and to provide context for the discussion of important issues of race and equity, which frequently arise in the review of proposals. I'm going to aim to share my screen now. Bear with me for a moment. In order to show you a preview of a racial equity report. Give me just a moment. The racial equity report is based on a form that is available on our website and includes 5 main sections. First is projects that trigger the requirements, check one of the boxes for the characteristics that the legislation spells out. There is an executive summary that summarizes the information provided within the remainder of the document. As you'll see, there's a lot of information in the document. This is intended to make it accessible. There's project-specific information about the housing that is proposed to be provided, including not just the number of units, but the anticipated rent levels and incomes for residents based on what is known about the project at present, with a brief narrative accompanying that. Any jobs that are specifically that are associated with specific uses proposed in a project, to the extent that that information is known by the applicant, as well as anticipated jobs related to construction of the project. A community profile summary, which is drawn from the Equitable Development Data Explorer, which includes a brief narrative, but also charts and tables that have been extracted from the tool that we make available online. I'm scrolling through them. The actual racial equity reports that are for the projects that come before the commission are provided to the commission in their packet and made available on our website in the ZAP application, accessible to the public. And as a matter of practice, we are going to be, staff from the department will be briefing the commission on the contents of the racial equity report at the time of certification, extracting key data that is informative about the applicant's characterization of the project. There's also, I'll mention this because we are also very careful about the proper use of data, a guide to understanding margins of error, because a lot of the data in the tool are based on sample data and need to be taken into account with the margin of error associated with them. So there's a brief guide for everyone to understand how to use the data. And then there is a narrative. The applicant's narrative about how their project relates to the city's stated goals of affirmatively furthering fair housing and promoting equitable access to opportunity in the neighborhood and throughout the city. And so the applicant provides a brief, accessible narrative describing how their project relates to that. And finally, and I will not go through the entirety of this, the community profile, as laid out in the legislation, there's a requirement to provide data on demographic conditions, and all of the aspects are from the Equitable Development Data Explorer. There's a lot of data here. This is essentially like a technical appendix to the document that is available for every project and helps to provide information for those who are interested in the detailed information about the project and the neighborhood data. And with that, we can take any questions that the commission has about the racial equity report.
Great. Thank you very much, Howard. Thanks to you and Lara and all of, and Michael, who I know is also present, and also to our partners for all of their work. Hello, Michael. I see you now. Good to see you. Let me just pose one question, and then I'm going to go over to Commissioner Goodridge and then Commissioner Rampersad. The mechanics of the report, when it's filed, what happens next? What is the, what is the, the failure to file the report? What happens? Just walk us through when in this process we will be seeing these, and how commissioners will be seeing them, how the public will be seeing them, and then if there's a consequence for failure to file.
I'll start by fielding that question, Commissioner. Chair Grodnick. The application requirement is incumbent on the applicant. They are required to complete these by the time that their applications are ready for public review, and we work with them to sort of provide the same sort of technical support needed to do that. The characterizations in the document are all the applicant's characterizations. And we, the legislation requires that this be sort of filed and at the time of the beginning of the land use process and distributed, I think, within 10 days of the beginning of that process. We make it available on our website next to all of the other application materials, but it is separate from that. It is not, an application material that constitutes this is an incomplete application for the purposes of certification. So, it is in theory possible that someone might fail to file one of these, but it is our expectation that the process itself is one where the commission and all parties to the land use process are asking the applicant to share the information that is required of them as part of the legislation. And so we're working with applicants to make sure that they have the tools that are necessary to do that.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Commissioner Goodrich.
Hi, good. Thank you so much for this wonderful information. Oh, there I am. Okay, so I have a few questions. One is under one of the graphs, it has like vulnerable housing, and it said housing that's not rent stabilized and other types of housing. I was wondering why exclude rent stabilized housing from that? I asked because I'm just wondering right, so I'll let you finish first.
And this is when we sort of describe in the housing vulnerability indicators, using non-rent regulated housing as an indicator of vulnerability. Is that what you're inquiring about, Commissioner?
Yeah, I think I saw on the graph there that it said everything but rent stabilized. I don't know if I'm correct about that, but it was just a quick look at the graph.
I'll give a brief answer, and others can fill in if there's something that I don't mention. But as with all of these things, I will mention that we can help provide, when we're looking at specific examples and there are questions, we can help provide information about the data in the tool itself. The idea in the housing vulnerability indicator is that we have aimed to try to identify characteristics that indicate higher vulnerability, not the presence or absence of any vulnerability to displacement. And so the prevalence of unregulated housing as compared to regulated housing, we've used as an indicator of that.
Okay, got it. And then my next question is for the, I guess, so the applicant provides the information about racial equity based on the tools that are provided on the website. How is that different from the environmental review process? Is that something where the applicant also provides all the information, or is that something where DCP is actively and affirmatively working? And then, can you explain to me the difference between the two? Because I know we get a negative declaration or not, and I'm wondering about these two processes and how they might be different or similar.
I would say that there are significant similarities in that we make available as much of the data as possible that's necessary to conduct the, to provide the analysis. So on the racial equity report, we have aimed to provide all of the data that's about the neighborhood, right? The project-based data has to be supplied by the applicant, as is always the case, but all of the data that's necessary to provide descriptions of neighborhood conditions and the sort of comparison between neighborhood conditions in the borough and city comes from our data tool. And on an environmental review, I would say that there's just a wider range of data that's necessary, and so we don't have a one-stop shop where you can get everything, but we are increasingly trying to make more of those tools available to applicants in order to make the application process as straightforward as possible. The big distinction I would draw here, with respect to your question, Commissioner, is that the environmental review process requires projections of future conditions and determinations of significance and other things that are spelled out in the environmental review statutes. And that is different from the racial equity report, where we don't have methodologies for projecting into the future. What we have is, what we are doing here is providing as much information as possible about existing conditions and what's going on in the neighborhood. And the applicant is providing as much information as possible about their project. And that enables the parties to the land use review process to examine those and look for ways in which those two relate to one another. And the applicant has to explain how they believe their project relates to the city's broader goals with respect to fair housing. It is different from what are the conditions going to be in the foreseeable future, and how do those compare to the condition without the action? It's a different analytic framework.
Okay, let me get to the heart of, I guess, my question that I'm kind of thinking through. I guess the main thing I'm thinking about is just accountability, right? And so, there may be an applicant who just beefs up, numbers or what have you. And I guess my main question to myself was, well, if there is a standard or any other kind of mechanism that's already used where, the main part of the information comes from DCP and not the applicant providing it, and there's some sort of, I don't know if you want to call it grading process, but determination. And so I thought of the environmental review. So I guess I'm more so thinking about accountability, so that when things are put in the hands of, applicants, developers, whatever you want to call them, that it's accurate, and there are, and so that's why my mind went to environmental review, and I was thinking of the two.
Right. You're saying
you should provide information about how we will, make sure that the information is accurate, because anyone can really just, we have applicants come here all the time, say that the project is going to be this, and then the final end of the project looks very different. And so that's my main concern.
I would say, I know that was definitely a concern of the Racial Justice Coalition in advocating for the bill, and also a big concern of the public advocate, who is the main sponsor of the bill. I think that is one of the main reasons that the way that the requirement is constructed is that the majority of the data, especially any data that describes existing conditions or trends, is produced directly by the Department of City Planning and not by the applicant. And so the summary of the community profile, which is a description of the neighborhood around the project, is downloaded directly from the data tool and then put into the report. And so the parts of the project that are kind of the applicant created is a little bit of narrative, just describing how the different pieces fit together, which yes, I guess there could be some spin in there theoretically, but it's, intended to be factual narrative describing, what the project is, a very quick summary, and then the narrative about how the applicant believes their project relates to the city's goals to affirmatively further fair housing. And then the description of the proposed project. And we've put together guidance that's, the department has posted on their website about, how to complete that section, with the intention being that the depictions are honest. So if the project is a, mandatory inclusionary housing project, it's an honest description of what an MIH project and the rents would be in that.
Okay, thank you. Are these materials going to be available? I know, but are they going to be available with the other packets that we receive, or is it this going to be something that we have to separately go to a website and look for?
We are going to be these are going to be provided in the packet that you're provided, is my understanding.
Okay, that's great. And then are they also going to be discussed in the presentations?
Yes, and actually today you will see. Listen, I will say this: the entirety of the 77-page document, for instance, is not going to be discussed, but absolutely the information that is provided, particularly the context about the neighborhood and any relevant chunks of the applicant provided information, will be described in that in the presentation.
Okay, for each of the presentations that we'll be getting on.
Yes.
Okay, great.
For instance, today.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then my last question is there going to be a team that's consistently working on this? Or is it that it's been created and so now going forward? Is there, I guess I'm just wondering if there's like a specific team or unit or department or initiative.
Commissioner, we're still, yes, we have a team here that's dedicated to watching this, making sure to make updates if we see things that are not working with the tool that the public has access to. And we'll be obviously monitoring the reports coming in. We do have an update we have to do by the legislation annually. So that team will also be working on figuring out, making sure that those updates happen, as well as our borough liaisons also are there as a resource for anyone in the public who may have questions about the Explorer or any of the reports.
Okay. And my very last question, and this will be it, just on this, is I guess I was wondering if the team is the racial demographics of the team, if the team is racially diverse itself.
I don't have that number necessarily offhand, but we are a team, about 40 people have been working on this from across many different divisions within DCP and HPD. We can come back to you with more information on that.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Goodrich. Let me go to Commissioner Rembershad.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. A lot of the questions I had, Commissioner Goodrich had asked, and so did the chair. And you know, one of the questions I really wanted you to focus on, what you just did, was there a dedicated team for this project? One of the things I'm looking at, I'm on the DCP website is a great website. I use it all the time. And I'm just curious in terms of, I know you said you're going to put it on the website, but there's so much information there. Is there going to be a more simplified way to find this? Like, for example, on the home page, I'm looking at strategic objectives. Would it be maybe a tab there so people can just click on it? Because I use the Zap portal all the time, and it's a little, I'll be honest, a little difficult to navigate when I want to find additional information. So is there a way to simplify this even further so the public can just go into the website, click a button, boom, it's there?
Commissioner, I want to make sure I understand your question. Are you saying quicker access to the racial equity reports,
Yes,
or to the data tool?
Well, both, because I look at the data tool on the website I'm on right now. I hit data and tools. I don't see it up there. I do see like the map, Pluto, zoning related and digital tax map, housing development, census, and so forth. So is there going to be a tab there that's going to say racial equity report? I'm just curious how this is going to look.
Well, right now, the racial equity report, the access to the form and other things are on the applicant portion of the website, but we can, and the access to the specific submitted reports are connected through Zap, as you mentioned. But we're happy to figure out the right way to make information accessible from the website and link to our web team to make sure that there are enough easy pathways into this on our website, and we'll be happy to follow up and figure out how to do that.
I think it would be great for the public. I mean, like I said, I use the website a lot, and sometimes even I have a little difficulty navigating because there's multiple steps to get to that information. So if there's a way to simplify it, it'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Good suggestion, Commissioner Rembershad. Thank you. Commissioner Burney.
Yeah, thank you, Howard and Michael. So this isn't like an EIS in the sense that if a project is seen to be adding to racial disparity, that the applicant is required to do mitigation. It doesn't work that way, right? Okay.
That's correct. That's correct. There's no projection of the future condition and determination of significance or any of those things that are associated with.
Okay.
Impacts.
So if a project report, the RER report, does indicate that there would be some form of displacement, is the city able to take action on its own to mitigate it, or what are we going to do if we get into that situation?
The project, the analysis of there is still a seeker analysis related to socioeconomic conditions and the potential for displacement, and that analysis continues to exist. The form itself won't tell you, that displacement, that indirect or direct or whatever kind of displacement will or will not happen. That's not what the analysis and the project-based information provides in terms of information. To To the extent that there are impacts related to displacement, that is a socioeconomic conditions analysis and would be assessed in that arena.
So what are you really trying to learn?
I think one of the things, Michael, why don't you just jump in if you think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the key, I think a key thing that's added here is that the you have a standard set of neighborhood data that's presented about each project, which would facilitate ideally more robust and healthy discussions at the community board and at all the levels of ULURP by having a kind of agreed upon, here's the set of relevant neighborhood data, the right way to look at it rather than competing analysis of census data that's presented by different parties. And you have the description of the proposed project. And I know that one of the main points that the framers of the legislation were hoping to get at was really about who the project will benefit in terms of like what type of person might live in the housing, what type of person might access jobs in this, specific economic development proposal, and how might that, and then, folks that are reading these reports might be able to then compare that to the community profile and understand who is in this community and how those two might relate to each other or not relate to each other. But there's not a determination in the report itself. It's a tool for facilitating healthier discussions.
So it might be a case of, be careful what you ask for, because you may find information coming in that really, is actionable and requires some form of mitigation. So, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah,
I don't get the sense that, Lara's just doing this to gather data. This is, it's meaningful information, right?
Commissioner, I just want to also bring back to this idea that the projects are being held up against the city's broader goals for fair housing and the related, equitable access to opportunity as embedded in the fair housing plan. And I don't want to speculate, but should a project come in that clearly is inconsistent with those objectives, that is what this process can highlight. That is what the process of the data disclosure, the project information disclosure, and the narrative that's provided in the RER are there to highlight for that reason.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Burney. Next up, Commissioner Cerullo.
Thank you, Chair. I think Commissioner Goodrich raised an interesting point about the fact that many applications, I won't say look completely different than they did at the start, but there's a lot that occurs through the land use process and comments made during the public review process that changes what was an original application to what actually gets adopted at the end by the council. And so, I don't mean to repeat any previous question, but a couple of things that came to mind. One is because very often we don't have all the information, or an applicant is uncertain whether they are or they just at least articulate an uncertainty in the process about certain elements, particularly with respect to units, unit sizes, affordability, etc. So I'm wondering, taking all of that into account at the beginning of the process, if there's an MIH, if it's a neighborhood rezoning that the city might undertake where MIH is being mapped, or it's a private application where MIH is being mapped, will an applicant have to provide the answers to those questions for each and every option, since all the options are in scope, so that those who are weighing in on the process as it goes forward understand the implications, or only on the option or options they are selecting at that time the application is being certified?
It's a good question, and it's challenging. You know, the legislation that enacted this left that a little kind of open to us to figure out the details there, and we've been hard at work trying to figure those out. I mean, there is significant uncertainty, you know, at the time of ULURP with regards to what future rents are going to be. If it's an income restricted unit that's marketed through the city's Housing Connect process, the rents are going to be determined at the time that the financing closes, which is well after ULURP based on AMIs in that year, and the incomes, you know, determined at the time that the project is marketed, which is 2 years after that, after the building has been built. So anything that goes in the report is an estimate, you know, or the best guess. We've included a significant amount of guidance for applicants about how to fill that out, you know, what assumptions to make for an MIH project if it is an applicant-led rezoning, or sorry, like a private site MIH rezoning. We're asking them to say the option that they plan to use if they're proposing a specific option. We haven't, I think when we do a neighborhood rezoning, we'll have to figure out, are we showing multiple versions of this? Anything is presented as a range in terms of, you know, the unit sizes. The other thing that's complicated here is that, you know, for any given income restricted housing project, you have a range of unit sizes, which have different rents, different AMI tiers, which have different rents. So within any given project, you might have 20, 30 different rents and incomes that the project's going to serve. And so there's just a display of information challenge. So everything is presented as ranges in terms of, you know, what's the range of what an income would be for an 80% AMI 1-bedroom or a studio through a 3-bedroom, if that's what's in the project, and then, you know, for a 1 to 5%.
So thank you, Michael, for that. So I guess my follow-up, and in some level of consistency in believing that if government is going to require certain or place certain obligations, which I think are important, on sort of private applicants, what role or what obligations are on us and those representing government in this process when they make recommendations to modify an application? Are they required to also do a similar analysis or modify this report to show, for better or for worse, what the implications of their version of a private or city application may be? As we know, this goes to things look very differently at the end than they may have at the beginning. I think we all want to believe that they're better at the end than they might have been at the beginning, or they're addressing different needs that a community has. But if, for example, we choose to modify an option, which I know does not happen often, but it does happen as you get deeper into the land use review process at the council. Borough presidents make recommendations that are different than an applicant's application. What happens then? Is this document really only relevant at the start, and then after that has no real relevance because everyone will start to weigh in and place their priorities into the process that deem the data? It's there, obviously, and there's a moment in time it represents. But what happens to that as you go through the process, and how does the council at the end weigh in if things are changing all along the way? Or how does the public, this is all about public disclosure and input, how does the public trust that the application is being adopted in a better form with less impact, or perhaps positive impact, however we want to define it, on a community?
Commissioner, I'll start by coming back to the something that I mentioned, which is that the subject matter of the RER is not the same as the subject matter of the land use application. And like other things that the commission and the public are reviewing when they review a project, there are sort of elements of the project that are the subject of discussion in the public review process that aren't specifically about this, whether this is an R6A district or an R6B district, but that there are details that are the subject of discussion. And this document has a lot in common with those other project details, things like the images illustrating the proposed design of the project, which are not specified in the approvals themselves, but are the subject of the ongoing discussion in the public review process. And it's been our expectation that this is going to be a lot like that subject matter, in the sense that there's disclosure to provide enough information to give the public and the applicant the ability to have a concrete discussion of what it is they intend to do, and that gets carried through the process, as with other aspects of the proposal that aren't specifically embedded in the land use actions themselves. Does that?
Yes, I understand that generally. I guess if I were just whittling down, and I won't take up any more time on this, that if this is about trying to understand equity and potential displacement, as the application changes, those implications also change. And the only data anyone would be working with was on the applicant's first version of what they wanted, is what they were presenting at the start, and not as the facts change, which I would be led to believe the implications could also change on those areas that this report is trying to gather and provide to the public. But I appreciate the responses, so thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. All right, next up, Commissioner Ortiz.
Some questions, clarifications. I share some of the concerns that Commissioner Cirillo alluded to in terms of requirements on private developers. And I know that you're in a position where you have to figure out how you're going to develop the rules for legislation that you were not involved in passing the legislation. So I understand that, and I appreciate the position you're in. But one question, when we talk about the socioeconomic impact chapter in SEEKR, which, there just seemed to be a lot of overlap with what we're trying to accomplish. And that is a powerful tool that allows us to begin to think about mitigation if necessary. What is your sense of how duplicative this is with that chapter in terms of the kind of data that's being collected? And and are we asking, it's a philosophical question, are we asking applicants to do something twice and adding costs to projects that are unnecessary and increasing development costs in an already very expensive market to develop in?
I'll try to answer both halves of that question, but if I somehow didn't get to both, please come back to the other half. I will say that there are similarities between the socioeconomic analysis and this analysis, and I would say that the core similarity is that the project described in one has to be the same as the project described in the other, and that's another thing that sort of that anchors these things together. When the applicant says that they are proposing a project that has the following characteristics in terms of rents and incomes, that has to be consistent between the two documents, and that's something that we're going to be working to ensure. That said, the geography associated with the socioeconomic analysis is often a different geography. The sort of analysis area isn't the same as the geographies that the EDDE is able to provide all the indicators required for the RER for, so that those analyses are occurring often at a higher geographical level, because of the fact that a lot of these indicators are based on sample size data that aren't going to be statistically reliable below the community district scale. So there will be other more detailed analyses and indicators that are used for the socioeconomic analysis. Some projects sort of will trigger the threshold to require a detailed analysis to look at those things in more detail, and some projects won't. The two will need to align and speak to each other. And again, I think the core thing is they're describing the same project, but there are going to be different characteristics of the outputs from the two of them.
What are the differences in thresholds in terms of, what is required to, trigger RER versus seeker? Is there anything sort of quick on that?
I'll just say that one is spelled out in the legislation, and the other one is, it looks at, for instance, the relative change in the area's population, like the supply of housing within an area. In other words, this is going to be more than a small addition to the area's population, whereas the legislation for the RER refers to absolute numbers that are sort of consistent, regardless of the geography or the context. So there are differences, Commissioner, we're not insensitive to the question of, are we requiring someone to do things twice? And our aim here has been to implement the legislation as it's spelled out without doing that wherever possible. And so therefore, I think our effort to make the data for everything except the applicant's project available completely from the data tool is what distinguishes it. And it really does, I think, reduce the costs of generating the document because you don't have to do independent research into all these demographic and socioeconomic characteristics. You can just rely on the tool for them.
And do we know what those costs generally might be? What's this mandate that we're requiring now? Does anyone have a sense of what an RER might run?
I think we'll have a better sense of that after the first few of them, and we can talk to applicants. We do maintain a ongoing conversation with applicants about not just this aspect of the land use application process, but the applicant experience in the land use application process generally. And we want to try to moderate those effects in a practical way and make sure that the guidance that we're providing them for the preparation of the document enables them to do it without additional iteration or costs. And so that's been our effort. We'll get back to you when we have more information about that, I suppose.
And are affordable housing projects precluded from RER? They also have to go through this. So we're adding costs to affordable housing projects effectively.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing the reports for them. I'll say yes to that part of the question. The legislation is relatively inclusive, so it's pretty much any new construction affordable housing project that's going through ULURP and going before the commission, so ULURP or UDAP, above 50 units. So it's pretty much all of them.
This is legislation that DC.
Well, sorry, I would just add that a significant number of the affordable housing projects that come through the commission are projects where HPD is the applicant, and so we will be producing a significant number of these reports over time. Anticipate that they'll get easier and easier as we do more and more of them, and we're currently kind of figuring out our internal process. But it's likely that the agency will be doing a lot of the work ourselves rather than putting that on the affordable housing developers.
And Commissioner, I'll just add one other thing. It's tangentially related, but I think we've been spending a lot of time focusing on projects that add housing. I just want to emphasize that also a project that in theory would eliminate the ability to build housing at a certain scale would also be subject to this reporting requirement and would have to describe the extent to which that project is consistent with fair housing goals and objectives as well. So, I know we've been focusing on this because most of the projects that come before us are about building things. But, this is a requirement that, as the legislation spelled it out, applies to a few different categories of applications and would have to be administered for those as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Ortiz. Let me go now to Vice Chair Knuckles.
Thank you, Chair. I think some of the questions have touched on this, but I just wanted to drill down a bit, and that is on the integrity of the content in these reports that we get from private developers. I mean, I give some benefit of the doubt to HPD and our fellow city agencies, principally HPD, I suppose. But I mean, there are certain, hopefully objective facts about AMI, demographics, impacts on schools, etc., that I would hope could not be skewed by any one individual applicant. So I guess my question is, what are the guardrails in our analysis such that we make sure that there are no alternative facts around some of these issues, around demographics, around AMI, and around the potential impact those factors could impose?
I'll speak on the AMI side. We're working through the guidance that we have to the applicants and then the review of the materials from the borough teams at DCP to make sure that everyone is using AMI consistently. There aren't alternative facts when it comes to AMI, but there are a lot of choices you have to make when you decide how to present it. And so the goal would be that every applicant is presenting it in the same way, that, for an MIH option 2 project, they're all going to say, this is what the rents are, for an MIH option 2 project. So we're still working out, I think, a couple of the kinks, but we're pretty close there to being having consistency. But the idea would not be that there's divergence between the different applicant versions of this, that it would all be very standardized when it comes, especially to an MIH. What's the affordable rent? And on the demographics, maybe, I don't know if Howard or Lara want to answer.
I would say the same thing on demographics that Michael said. The goal here is to present information that is transparent, accurate, and objective, and that's why we don't let people write their own demographics, provide their own demographics tables. We require that they download them from our data tool to make sure that we have a common set of facts that we're all operating from. How they contextualize their project within that is their applicant's characterization, much the same way it is the way that they present their project and present the land use application, and that is where the commission will be evaluating how their characterizations stand next to the data that we have, the objective data that we've all shared.
Well, Howard, let me ask you this: what would, and I know we're at the beginning of this, so this, you don't have a lot to evaluate at this point, but what would be a red flag in terms of these reports that would, from your perspective and department's perspective, really raise concerns about the integrity of what's in the report?
I'm going to do my best to answer that question, Commissioner.
Yeah.
Not having seen one such example yet, I would say that just as with other characterizations of the project that are included in the applicant's LR3 document, where they say this project will, if they describe the project as achieving something that it couldn't possibly achieve, then that would be something that I think we would want to scrutinize, right? We want to make sure that their characterizations of what they're proposing to build are grounded, and that is the subject of discussion during the process, right? The applicant says this project will facilitate the following, and then that's where we focus our attention, is how are they going to build that? What do we think of the details of what they're presenting? But I can't off the top of my head think of something that I would say an applicant presenting this would be, a red flag. Go ahead, Michael. You have one, please.
Describing affordability, in the absence of a real concrete plan with HPD for achieving that affordability would be a red flag. So if it's a project that's going to map MIH, it's a private site, and they're saying, oh, well, it's going to be 50% affordable, but not having, a pretty clear concrete plan with an agency and HPD sign off on them putting that in the applicant, that'd certainly be a red flag for me, and I hope it would be a red flag for DCP too. I know it would be a red flag.
And I'd say that I think that's something that's a good example of something that we always ask applicants to, engage with HPD about how they're going to achieve the affordability they describe in their projects, and that's a perfect example. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Let me go to Commissioner Levin.
Yes, the displacement risk index. Is that something that stands completely apart from this report? There's a separate page in the Data Explorer that maps out neighborhoods. And so does that get referred to in the report? Is there a link to it in the report? I don't see it summarized in the report. How is the public going to access? I have a feeling people are going to be very interested in that characterization. How do we connect it to an application?
The community profile summary, I believe, describes where, what category which of the displacement risk index levels the application's neighborhood is located.
Yeah, I would also note that depending on what the project is, it might be referenced in the affirmatively furthering fair housing applicant statement. And depending on what the project is, it might show up in the executive summary as a relevant neighborhood indicator. I'll just note it is on a separate page of the website because it is at a different geographical level than the rest of the data on the website. It's presented at the neighborhood tabulation area, so a smaller geography than the rest of the data. And that's why it's got its own kind of separate tab on the website.
Okay, well, I'm just skimming the 280 Bergen report, which I'm just seeing for the first time. And, it's not jumping out at me how you would get to that index information. And I think human nature in the public is going to have people jumping to that part of this analysis first and wanting to know why. Which of the various 12 components that go into the index are the salient ones for this application, and how do we match it up with what's proposed to be done in this application?
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know if that's a question, but that is a good point.
No question. Obviously, there's going to be a lot for all of us to learn in how to work with this tool and how to use it effectively. So, but it's
I guess my one reaction there would be, the idea is the whole tool in its totality is designed to facilitate better conversations about racial equity through the public review process, and so. If the applicant is not covering it well in their report, I would expect community boards to be asking about it in their review, as well as the commission and other members in the ULURP process.
Thank you, Commissioner. Great. Let me go back to Commissioner Goodrich.
I was muted. Okay, just a few. I was writing some stuff down. Let's say an applicant developer says that an area for the project is 60% AAPI, and it's not. After that, in their statement, in the racial equity statement, after that is DCP reviewing it for accuracy, or it's just presented as that is what they're saying.
Yeah, if their narrative says that, we're working to sort of make sure their narrative corresponds to the data that comes out of the community profile. And if they say something in the narrative that's inconsistent with the community profile, we're going to tell them that and have them correct it.
Okay, so there is, because I just want to clarify this, because I think what I was thinking about before was the applicant submits their statement and then that's it. It's just submitted to the commission. But the applicant submits their statement and then DCP reviews it for accuracy. There's a second step.
Yeah, the borough liaison will be, the borough planner who's working with the applicant will be reviewing to make sure that those discrepancies aren't there within the description, and then working with our team to make sure when it's submitted that those things are cleared up.
Okay, great. Because I was getting a bit worried because, I would hate for, from the concerns raised before, for then the burden to be pushed on the community to then go, in addition to like fighting about the actual substance, it's not very fair, and it's sort of perpetuating what we would want to avoid in racial equity. So that would be helpful for that second step. If it's not just, their word, but they're working, and then there's a checker basically to see if the information is accurate. So there,
Yeah.
so DCP is involved in it. So the way I was thinking about it was DCP's hands off. The applicant just, you know, submits a statement. This is their narrative. This is what they want to say. And then we just review it. And then if people have a problem with it, whatever, then the community board can say something or whatever. But in actuality, DCP is going to be checking for the accuracy of the applicant statement before it's dispersed to anyone.
Commissioner, we're working out exactly how we're going to, you know, we're learning as we go, as we do the first couple of these projects. But I think that's a good overall description. We want to make sure that the factual content is accurate. And that's one of the reasons why we, as Michael said earlier, structure this to sort of draw the factual information from the same source. So then all the representations of factual information about the neighborhood are consistent and accurate. That's what we're aiming to accomplish. The applicant's characterizations of their own project are, of course, the applicant's characterizations of their project, but we want to make sure that the facts, we're working with one set of facts about the neighborhood.
Right. Because I know when we had the M-Crown presentation, like that was very in-depth with the characteristics of the neighborhood that DCP had that information on its own. So that's why I was thinking it can totally produce this just without the applicant. Okay, that's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Anybody else before we proceed to the rest of our agenda here? Okay, seeing none, Howard, Lara, Michael, thank you very much for your work on this and for your time today and answering these questions. And we'll look forward to working with you to continue to refine access and details on this to make it more accessible to everyone. So thank you very much. And we're going to move on. Ryan, would you like to introduce our first and perhaps only Brooklyn certification for today and
Certainly.
get to the next steps here?
Certainly. So the first item on our agenda is a certification of a zoning map and zoning text amendment in Brooklyn Community District 2. Amrita Mahesh is our presenter. Amrita.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Next slide, please. This is an application for a zoning map amendment and a zoning text amendment to facilitate a 4-building, approximately 238,000 square foot, predominantly residential development with 300 apartments, approximately 90 of which would be affordable apartments, 9,600 square feet of commercial space, and 10,000 square feet of community facility space in the Borum Hill neighborhood of Community District 2 in Brooklyn. Next slide. The applicant is seeking a zoning map amendment from an M12 district to an R7D district with a C24 overlay, as well as R7A districts, and a zoning text amendment to establish a mandatory inclusionary housing area. Next slide. The project area is in the southern edge of the Borum Hill neighborhood between downtown Brooklyn and Gowanus. The surrounding area is developed with a wide range of building typologies and a mix of uses, including 2 to 3 story mixed use and residential buildings, multifamily apartment buildings, institutional buildings, houses of worship, offices, and some lofts and warehouses. The development site is located along 3rd Avenue, which is a 2-way mixed-use corridor and local truck route that connects downtown Brooklyn to Bay Ridge. 4th Avenue, one of the major thoroughfares in Brooklyn, is located 1 block east of the project area. Uses along 4th Avenue vary and include commercial and semi-industrial uses and multifamily walk-up buildings, as well as newer apartment buildings. To the south are the NYCHA Wyckoff Gardens and 572 Warren Street developments, which consist of buildings ranging from 6 to 21 stories. The Brooklyn High School for the Arts, PS 38, and the North Pacific Street Playground are located a few blocks to the north and northwest of the project area. The project area is within the transit zone with access to several subway lines, regional transit, bus lines, and city bike. The Atlantic Avenue, Barclays Center, and Atlantic Terminal stations are located a quarter-mile away, and the B37 and B103 bus lines make stops along 3rd and 4th Avenues, respectively. The Commission may recall a recent application for a rezoning, 98 3rd Avenue, which is located on the same block as this application. A favorable report was adopted by the Commission at the recent May 11th public hearing. The application is currently under review by the City Council. Next slide. The project area is mapped with an M12 light manufacturing district shown here in purple. The M12 district allows for a variety of light manufacturing uses such as repair shops, wholesale service, and storage facilities. Other zoning districts in the surrounding area include a number of medium density R6 and R7 residential districts shown here in yellow, and are largely improved with row houses and multifamily residential buildings. Several blocks along 3rd Avenue are mapped with a C24 commercial overlay. Commercial overlays are mapped along streets that serve local retail and service needs and allow a range of uses such as grocery stores, restaurants, general stores, laundromats, and similar businesses. The special downtown Brooklyn district is located 3 blocks north of the project area and seeks to encourage high density development in Brooklyn's central business district. Areas to the south and east of the project area, including portions of 4th Avenue, are within the recently adopted special Gowanus mixed-use district. Next slide. Here is a zoomed-in plan of Block 388 facing northwest. The project area comprises the majority of Block 388. The development site consists of lots 19, 51, and 42, shown here in yellow. The development site has a total lot area of 50,700 square feet. Lot 19 is improved with a 2-story industrial building. Lot 42 is improved with a single-story accessory office building utilized by the industrial facility. And Lot 51 is unimproved. The lots shaded in pink along the 3rd Avenue frontage and the Nevin Street frontage are city-owned properties under the control of HPD. They are currently used as accessory surface parking and accessory office space by the neighboring industrial business owned by the applicant, the ULURP Corporation, located on Lot 19, for a long-term lease agreement with HPD. If this application is approved, the applicant has indicated that they would be open to discussing the release of the leased parcels in order to facilitate a future HPD proposal on the city-owned lots. The project area was previously located in the Bergen Street Urban Renewal Area, which was approved by the City Planning Commission in July of 1971 and expired in 2011. Next slide. This is a view of 3rd Avenue looking north. This segment of 3rd Avenue has a mapped width of 70 feet and is considered narrow for the purposes of zoning. Seen here are the non-applicant controlled lots within the project area along the 3rd Avenue frontage and consists of a medical clinic and surface parking. The 98 3rd Avenue site is improved with the gas station and is seen in the background. Next slide. Here is a view of Bergen Street looking west, and the development site Lot 19 is seen on the left of the image. Next slide. This is a view of the project area from the corner of Nevin Street and Bergen Street looking south. Next slide. And this is a view from the corner of Nevin Street and Wyckoff Street looking east. The city-owned lot used as surface parking is seen on the left. Next slide. And here is another view of Wyckoff Street looking west and a portion of the development site, Lot 51. Next slide. And this is a view from the corner of 3rd Avenue and Bergen Street looking south. The NYCHA Wyckoff Gardens campus is seen in the background. Next slide. The proposed development would have a total floor area of approximately 238,000 square feet and would include approximately 228,000 square feet of residential space, 9,600 square feet of commercial space, and 10,000 square feet of community facility space. The development would comprise 4 buildings. The image here is oriented facing south. Sycamore Place, a 9-story, 95-foot tall mixed-use building, would be located on Lot 19, fronting on Bergen Street. It would contain approximately 4,600 square feet of ground floor retail space and 5,000 square feet of cellar retail space closest to 3rd Avenue. It would also include 5,500 square feet of ground floor community facility space and another 4,500 square feet of cellar community facility space. The building would also contain the majority of the proposed development's ground level parking garage. The proposed development would provide parking for approximately 125 cars. The parking garage would be accessed by a curb cut on Bergen Street. The proposed commercial and community facility uses in the development do not meet the floor area threshold for required loading berths. However, the proposed development will include 2 permitted loading berths along Bergen Street for use by the retail tenant and the residential component for tenant move-ins and move-outs, and for storage of waste between trash and recycling pickups. Next slide. This image is oriented facing north. Linden Place, a 9-story, 95-foot tall residential building, would be located on the south side of Lot 19, fronting on Wyckoff Street. It would contain approximately 33,000 square feet of residential floor area. Linden Place would contain a portion of the proposed development's ground level parking garage as well. Additionally, 2 3-story residential townhouse style buildings would front on Wyckoff Street on lots 42 and 51. Each would contain approximately 2,400 square feet of floor area. The 2 townhouse buildings would be located on either side of the existing 3-story townhouse buildings within the existing R6B district on block 388. Next slide. Here are some renderings of the proposed development. This is a view of the largest building, Sycamore Place, located along Bergen Street. Next slide. Here is another view of Sycamore Place along Bergen Street looking west. Next slide. And this is an image of the Linden Place building along the Wyckoff Street frontage. Next slide. The proposed actions consist of a zoning map amendment from the M12 district to R7D C24 and R7A districts. The proposed R7D C24 district would be mapped at a depth of 100 feet from 3rd Avenue on the eastern end of block 388. Lot 42 and part of lot 43 would be amended from M12 to R7A. Next slide. I would note that the proposed zoning along the 3rd Avenue frontage is consistent with the neighboring 98 3rd Avenue proposal. However, in the case of the 98 3rd Avenue proposal, beyond 100 feet from 3rd Avenue, the 98 3rd Avenue applicant proposes an amendment from an M12 district to an R6B district by extending the existing R6B district. The proposed, next slide. The proposed R7A zoning district is a quintessential New York City apartment building district. It results in 7 to 9-story apartment buildings and is found in several places in Brooklyn, notably along Ocean Avenue in Prospect Park South and along 7th Avenue in Sunset Park. When paired with MIH, it has a base height of 40 to 75 feet and a maximum building height of 95 feet or 9 stories. Next slide. The proposed R7D zoning district results in larger apartment buildings appropriate along major corridors and boulevards. Buildings in R7D districts are typically 8 to 11 stories and come up to the street. The district is mapped along Myrtle Avenue and its commercial equivalent is mapped along Fulton Street in Bed-Stuy in Brooklyn. When paired with MIH, it has a base height of 60 to 95 feet and a maximum height of 115 feet or 11 stories. Next slide. The applicant is also seeking a zoning text amendment to Appendix F of the zoning resolution to establish a mandatory inclusionary housing area coterminous with the rezoning area. MIH options 1 and 2 would be mapped. The proposed development would comply with option 2, which requires that 30% of the new residential floor area, approximately 68,500 square feet, be reserved for incomes averaging 80% AMI and below. 90 of the proposed 300 dwelling units would be subject to these requirements. Next slide. Pursuant to Local Law 78 of 2021, effective June 1st, this application requires a racial equity report on housing and opportunity because it would increase the permitted residential floor area by at least 50,000 square feet. The applicant states that the proposal would produce new income-restricted housing units in a location that has a high area median income and is highly accessible to transit and jobs, and creates new ADA-compliant housing, which would bolster options for independent living in the community. That concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Amrita, for that. I only have a couple of small ones, I think. So first, you have the NYCHA community just to the south, which I believe it's Wyckoff Gardens, right?
That's right, Wyckoff Gardens.
Can you compare the height of what's being proposed to Wyckoff Gardens, just to orient us on scale here?
Sure. The Wyckoff Gardens developments are approximately 21 stories in height, and the proposed development on the mid-block is largely zoned, is proposed to be zoned R7A, which has a cap of 9 stories. So it would be a maximum of 95 feet. So Wyckoff Gardens would be nearly double what the applicant is proposing. On the 3rd Avenue frontage, the maximum height for R7D is around 115 feet or 11 stories.
Okay, great. And the parking, let's see, there's 125 parking units here.
That's right.
What is required and what is the max?
As proposed currently, the applicant has 210 market rate units, so 50% of that would be 105 required spaces. The applicant is currently contemplating 125 parking spaces, so they have 20 spaces in excess of the requirement.
But they're below the max.
That's right.
Okay.
They are.
Okay, can you go back to that slide where you describe the R6 versus the R7 right next to us, 98 3rd Avenue?
Jeff, are you able to pull up slide 19, please?
Yep, that's the one. So can you just explain that to us one more time? So we have the 98 3rd Avenue rezoning that we voted for. It's pending before the city council. And that is the slide on the, well, it's in both, but it's in brown, right?
That's right. So the image on the right is the 98 3rd Avenue.
Okay, and they had proposed an R6B for that lot 42 just to their west. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, now this applicant wants to rezone the area that is currently contemplated to be rezoned as an R6B to an R7A, if I'm understanding you correctly. Is that right?
That's right.
And as a practical matter, what would that mean for this development that we are looking at here if we were to, I guess, well, you can tell me the technicals of how we change the consideration of one zoning when it's mid-process to another zoning later in the process, but what would be the effect of that on this 280 Bergen Street proposal?
So the difference in the district choice between R6B and R7A, it generates roughly around 5,000 square feet of floor area that could be accommodated elsewhere on the site. I would note that because the proposed R7A is next to an R6B district, there is a cap on height because of something called the transition rule in the zoning, informally referred to as the transition rule. So there is a bit of a height cap. So whatever additional floor area would be distributed across the rest of the site. And that's roughly 5,000 square feet. So I would say around 5 to 6 additional units.
Okay,
because of the R7A.
so there would be a cap on what you could do on lot 42,
That's
but
right.
the applicant here could spread it around the site and pick up 5 or 6 additional units. Is
That's
that right?
Mhm.
Okay. And just as a technical matter for us to look at that in the process of, you know, whatever is concluded here, let's just say the city council approves 98 3rd Avenue as proposed, then this would be an R6B, and this would just essentially be a follow-up, which would change the R6B to an R7A. Is that right?
I would defer to LUR on the specific requirements for how this application would need to be amended, but that's essentially right. It would have to be modified from an R6B to R7A as opposed to M12 to R7A.
Right.
I
right.
see.
We're just changing sort of the existing zoning in mid-process, and that's, I think we would technically maybe just do that, add a note to the application.
Okay. All right. Well, we will certainly, I'm sure we'll be coming back to that since we're only at certification here. Let me see if there are questions from the commission. Okay. Oh, there is one. Commissioner Burney, under the wire.
Sorry, I could be quicker off the mark.
That's okay.
Well, thank you. I just have one thought about this. You know, as we see in so many of these applications, a kind of steady erosion of low-cost manufacturing space, which this is currently. It's an M12, right? And, you know, while I understand M12 is probably not the best and highest use of a piece of property like this in Brum Hill, there are people, there are, I think, existing tenants in that space. I wonder where they're going to go. They're obviously going to be displaced. And then secondly, I think, you know, the idea of putting retail on this stretch of Bergen Street doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Bergen Street's not a retail street. It's primarily a residential street. The retail goes to the avenues on 3rd Avenue and 4th Avenue. And I wonder about the viability of retail on Bergen. So that leads you to the conclusion, well, couldn't this developer include some of that low-cost manufacturing space in lieu of a community facility where they're currently proposing retail?
Let me answer the first question. So the majority of the development block and the applicant property is utilized currently by the ULANO Corporation, which is a subsidiary of the applicant. ULANO has been phasing out their operations from this particular facility to outside of the city, as we understand it, and the applicant can speak to their reasons why during public hearing, but they are the primary industrial use within this block. And the applicant intends to redevelop their property given the changing nature of the area and the fact that this is just the one remaining M block. Regarding the retail, I do want to clarify that the retail portion is only towards 3rd Avenue. That's roughly a 25-foot sliver or so closest to 3rd Avenue. So it is very much within that framework of having retail uses within a certain amount of feet of a major corridor like 3rd Avenue. And regarding the use of the community facility as potentially an industrial tenant, I would defer to the applicant and can certainly relay that comment and they'll be best suited to respond.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Commissioner Ortiz.
I appreciate Commissioner Burney, raising that issue, and I would have to concur. I mean, we want to encourage some concentration of retail along 3rd Avenue rather than disperse it, and I think that the applicant should be aware of those concerns.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, any other questions, comments? Seeing none, 280 Bergen is certified. We're now going to move on. Thank you, Amrita.
Thank you.
We're going to go on to our Queen's certifications. Ryan, go ahead.
Sure. The second item on our agenda is a certification of a zoning map amendment in Queens Community District 4. Kathy Coe is our presenter. we will actually be going, it's 97, 27, 57 Fifth Avenue, 57th Avenue. This one's so hard to say. So we'll get that presentation up for you, Kathy. There we go.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Commission. We can move on to the next slide. This is a private application in Corona in Queens Community District 4 on the property located at 9727 57th Avenue. The applicant proposes a zoning map amendment to map a C24 commercial overlay on the entire property on the underlying R6A, C12, and R6B zoning districts to facilitate the expansion of an existing ground floor supermarket within an as-of-right new 6-story building with residential uses above. Next slide, please. The project area, which is circled in red, is in Corona, which is located in central Queens. It's just north of LaFrac City, which is a large residential complex, and is close to nearby regional malls along Queens Boulevard and Junction Boulevard. The project area has good access to public transit with 2 stations, the Woodhaven Boulevard and the 63rd Drive Rego Park station servicing the M and R lines, located about a half mile south and southwest. And there are also multiple bus lines servicing the area. And Flushing Meadows Corona Park is located about 1 mile east. Next slide, please. The project area was mapped with an R6 district in 1961 and a C12 commercial overlay was mapped in 1963. And the current R6A, R6B districts were mapped as part of the 1989 East Elmhurst rezoning. The surrounding area is characterized by residential, commercial, and community facility uses. The remainder of the block, as well as north and west and south of the project area, are mapped with residential districts, which are shaded in yellow. North and west of the project area is mapped with an R6B district, and it's comprised of two-story single detached residences and 3-story attached residential buildings. Immediately south of the project area is mapped R6 and is developed with the LaFrac City residential complex. East of the project area is mapped with an R7B district and consists of 7-story multifamily residential buildings. The area north of 55th Avenue, shaded in purple, is an M11 district, which consists of a Con Ed facility and light industrial uses such as local contracting and auto-related uses. Commercial overlays are mapped along 57th Avenue and 99th Street, shaded in red, and they consist of retail uses that serve the local community. Next slide. The project area, which includes block 1906, lots 1 and parts of 1143 are outlined here in black, and the development site consists of only lot 1, which is outlined here in red. Next slide, please. And here we have a closer view of the project area in context with its immediate surroundings. The development site's outlined here in red and is developed with a 1-story supermarket, which is owned by the applicant. Immediately south of the project, the supermarket is LaFrac City, which consists of 20 16-story residential buildings that house roughly 15,000 residents and approximately 4,600 units, as well as community facility uses such as daycares and a branch of the Queens Public Library. On the southwest portion of the superblock, there's a 20-story office building and a 6-story office building, which are primarily occupied by city, state, and federal agencies. And the stars on this map indicate supermarkets that are immediately close by. There's a food bazaar on the western side of LaFrac City on Junction Boulevard, and Great Wall, a Chinese supermarket on the eastern side on 99th Street. As you can see, each section of LaFrac City could be seen as their own micro neighborhoods because of its sheer density and superblock character, therefore justifying the need for numerous supermarkets in the area to meet local needs. And there's also an Aldi supermarket in Rico Center Mall, which is just south of the Long Island Expressway. Next slide, please. And for some background on the site, as I previously noted, the development site was mapped with an R6 district in 1961. And in 1962, the BSA granted a variance to permit the construction of a 1-story supermarket, which was not permitted in the then R6 district, and that variance was for a term of 25 years. In 1963, a C12 commercial overlay was mapped, but the variance was still needed for the northern portion of the supermarket, which was and still is mapped in the R6B district. And the variance has been extended numerous times, and the current one expires in February 2027. Next slide, please. Here we have a view facing southwest from 57th Avenue, showing the 1-story local retail nature on the north side of 57th Avenue, which is on the right side of this photo, and LaFrac City on the south side. Next slide. And here we have a view from 98th Street looking southwest at the current supermarket surface parking lot and existing curb cut. Next slide, please. And finally, here we have a view looking southeast from 97th Place with the development site on and an existing curb cut on the left and 2 to 3 story residences on the right. Next slide, please. The applicant proposes a new 6-story building at a height of 75 feet. It would include approximately 88,400 square feet at 4.51 FAR, including approximately 25,000 square feet of commercial space on the ground floor, and approximately 62,000 square feet of residential space on floors 3 through 6. And there would be 82 new dwelling units with 25 commercial spaces located in the cellar. 41 residential spaces would be provided on the second floor for a total of 66 parking spaces. Next slide, please. And the site plan shows the approximately 25,000 square feet of commercial space on the ground floor with an 18-foot curb cut providing access to the supermarket parking spaces on 97th Place. And on 98th Street, there would be a 24-foot curb cut with providing access to commercial loading and a 12-foot curb cut providing access to residential parking. Access to the residential lobby would also be located on 98th Street, and pedestrian access to the supermarket would be located on 57th Avenue. Next slide, please. And the proposed building would rise to a maximum height of 75 feet at 6 stories on 57th Avenue with a 15-foot setback at the 5th floor at 54 feet. Next slide. The building would then step down to 4 stories along 98th Street with its northernmost portion stepping down further to 3 stories in the R6B portion of the site. Next slide. And along 97th Place, the building would remain 4 stories tall along the southern portion of the property and step down to 2 stories within the R6B portion of the site. Next slide, please. To facilitate this development, the applicant proposes a map amendment to map the project area with a C24 commercial overlay over the existing R6A and R6B zoning districts, as indicated by the dotted outline on the right-hand side image. And the transition from a C12 to a C24 commercial overlay includes a reduction in parking requirements for food stores larger than 2,000 square feet and a wider range of flexibility for commercial uses. C1 districts permit use groups 1 through 5, which include local commercial uses that are already established along 57th Avenue, such as pharmacies and beauty parlors. And the C24 commercial overlay would expand the use categories to include use groups 1 through 8 and 14, which include other uses such as bicycle rental and repair shops, theaters and local amusements and more. But the applicant intends to retain the existing supermarket within the new development. By mapping a commercial overlay over the entire project area, the applicant would also have the opportunity to terminate the BSA variance. Next slide. In summary, this is an application for a zoning map amendment to map a C24 commercial overlay across the property. This is a northeast view of the project area. Next slide, please. And this action would facilitate the redevelopment, expansion, and modernization of an existing supermarket that's been serving the local community for decades. And here is a view looking southeast of the proposed development. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you very much. So just so I understand, this is the BSA variance exists, and it was a 25-year opportunity. Is that right?
Yeah, the term the variance extends for 25 years. The current one expires in February 2027.
Okay, and there already is a commercial overlay mapped, but the variance is still necessary. Tell us why the variance is still necessary, even though the C12 is already mapped there.
Sure, yeah, so the C12 is mapped only in the R6A portion of the site. So any portion of the site that is not within that C12, which includes the northern portion, which is mapped R6B, doesn't allow for commercial uses. So while the project area did include, was mapped with a C1 overlay at some point throughout the decades, it it didn't cover the entire site. So the variance process still needs to be in place.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Let me see if there are questions here. Okay, I see none. So Kathy, thank you very much. This item is certified and we will take it to the next step in the process. We appreciate your work.
Thank you.
Ryan, what's next?
So the third item on our agenda is a certification of a zoning map and zoning text amendment in Queens Community District 2. Teal Daly is our presenter. I will note that Commissioner Rompashot is recused on this item.
Thank you, Ryan.
There we go.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This is a presentation for certification of a rezoning located at 5802 Northern Boulevard. Next slide. The project area is located in the northeast corner of Community District 2 in the Woodside neighborhood of Queens, and the applicant is a private applicant named 5802 Northern Boulevard, LLC. Next slide. The applicant is requesting two actions. One is a zoning map amendment to change an R5 district to an R6B district with a C22 overlay. And the second action is a zoning text amendment to map a mandatory inclusionary housing area. These actions would facilitate the development of a new 2-story, 8,000 square foot boutique automobile sales showroom. Next slide. The project area has frontage on Northern Boulevard, which is a major commercial corridor and 100-foot wide street. Many auto dealerships are located along the corridor, and other auto uses, such as repair shops, are located there as well. Parts of the surrounding area are predominantly characterized by 1-story warehouses, auto repair shops, and parking. This is mainly near the Amtrak rail to the west and the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway to the east. The mid-blocks to the north and south of the project area are largely characterized by 2-story attached residential buildings. PS 152 is located 2 blocks to the east, and St. Michael's Playground is located approximately a quarter mile to the northeast of the project area. Project area is located within the transit zone with the M&R trains accessible via the Northern Boulevard station, which is located approximately a quarter mile to the west. The LIRR and the 7 train are accessible via the Woodside station and the 61st Street Woodside station, respectively, which are both located approximately 3/4 of a mile to the south of the project area. Additionally, the Q6S bus serving Long Island City and Flushing is accessible via Northern Boulevard. Next slide. The rezoning area is bound by Northern Boulevard to the north, 60th Street to the east, a line located at the mid-block 100 feet south of Northern Boulevard, and 58th Street to the west. Generally, the project area is surrounded by light industrial M11 zoning districts as depicted in purple on the map, located to the east and west, and low density R5 districts as depicted in yellow on the map to the north and the south. Next slide. The rezoning area consists of 3 tax lots as outlined by the black dotted line on the map. Within the rezoning area, the proposed development site is an irregularly shaped lot depicted in the red dashed line, and it's located on the block end with approximately 5,300 square feet in area. This lot has been improved with a 1-story commercial building built in 1930 with a parking area in the rear. The building was most recently used as a non-conforming eating and drinking establishment, but this use was discontinued 6 years ago. The other lots include a 2-story residential building, as well as a 2-story mixed residential and commercial building that has a car wash on the ground floor. Next slide. This photo shows a view of the development site facing south from Northern Boulevard. Next slide. And this photo shows a view of 60th Street facing south from Northern Boulevard with the development site at the right. Next slide. And this photo shows a view of 58th Street facing south from Northern Boulevard with the development site at the left. And next slide. Finally, we have a view of Northern Boulevard facing west from 60th Street, where the development site is on the left, and you can see the auto dealerships, including Honda and Ford in the background. Next slide. Under the proposed actions, an R5 district would be rezoned to an R6B district with a C22 commercial overlay. Next slide. The existing R5 zoning district results in a wide variety of low-scale housing types that range from detached single-family homes to small apartment buildings. This is a common zoning district in Queens and is largely mapped to nearby Astoria and Elmhurst. It does not generate enough floor area to qualify for MIH, nor does it have a predictable building type. There's a height limit of 40 feet, and the side yard requirements vary by building type, with the requirements listed here for detached homes, and then semi-detached and multifamily buildings would have smaller side yards. Next slide. The R6B zoning district results in a traditional row house, much like the attached homes built in the 19th century that are strongly associated with New York, and the R6B is mapped on the side streets of Astoria, as well as near Junction Boulevard at Roosevelt Avenue in Queens. It has a height limit of 55 feet with inclusionary housing, and new buildings must line up with their neighbors at the street. Although the zoning map amendment in this application would allow for a residential building, the applicant is proposing solely commercial uses. This approach allows for the site to be redeveloped in the future with commercial and/or residential uses at a modest increase in density, including required affordable housing. And this would all happen in a location on a wide street in an area accessible via transit. For the proposed development, however, the applicant would utilize just the C22 overlay for the auto showroom. C22 districts permit retail and commercial uses on the ground commercial uses up to a 2 FAR in residential districts designated R6B or higher in density. And although a C22 overlay could be mapped in the existing R5 district, this would allow for only a 1 FAR, and this would not facilitate the proposed development. Next slide. The applicant is also proposing to map MIH options 1 and 2 coterminous with the rezoning area. Next slide. The proposed development would include 8,000 square feet of commercial uses located in a new building that would be 25 feet in height with an FAR of 1.52. Approximately 4,500 square feet would be used for auto sales on the ground floor, and approximately 3,600 square feet would be used for accessory office space on a mezzanine. The showroom is designed to serve customers that have already decided on the model they plan to purchase, and they would look at vehicles through the automobile manufacturer's website. They would then go to this showroom in person to allow customers to select custom configuration options with the assistance of showroom employees and kiosks. Purchased automobiles would then be delivered from an offsite location to the customer's home or office. Next slide. A vehicle elevator would be installed inside of the building to move cars between the cellar and the ground floor showroom, and 12 cars could be stored in the cellar. 4 attended parking spaces would be located just south of the building, and there are existing curb cuts located on 58th Street and 60th Street on either side of the proposed development to facilitate vehicle circulation between the street and the site. Next slide. And finally, the private applicant 5802 Northern Boulevard is requesting a zoning map amendment to change an R5 district to an R6B C22 district, as well as a zoning text amendment to map MIH. These actions would facilitate a new 8,000 square foot boutique auto sales showroom. This concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take questions.
Great, thank you, Teal. Let me see if there are questions for you. I do not believe I have any. Let's see. Okay. All right. So in summary, we got a 2-story, 8,000 square foot auto showroom. The R6B allows the C22 to have 2 FAR because it's associated with a slightly higher density R district. But they're not going to use it for residential. They're just going to use it for that that additional commercial opportunity.
Exactly.
Okay, I got it. All right, let's see. Anybody else? All right. Thanks, Teal. Appreciate that. This item 5802 is certified, and we will go to the next.
Right. The 4th item on our agenda is a referral of a non-ULURP modification to a previously approved acquisition in Queens Community District 2. Teal will present this one as well.
Welcome back, Teal.
Thank you. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. FDNY and DCAS are requesting a non-ULURP modification to a previous acquisition action that was adopted in 2001. The location is block 2657, lot 28, which is located in the Maspeth neighborhood of Community District 2 in Queens. This would facilitate the acquisition of the remainder of the lot for vehicle maintenance, repair, and storage uses. Next slide. The surrounding area is predominantly characterized by 1- and 2-story warehouses, distribution centers, and industrial buildings. Notable examples include the Home Depot Home Improvement Store, the Coca-Cola Distribution Center, and the FedEx Distribution Center, which are all located either adjacent to or very near the development site. This Home Depot site is also the location of the first special permit for a self-storage development in a manufacturing area in the city. Within the greater Maspeth neighborhood, 2 large cemeteries are located to the north of the project area, and an established residential area is located to the east of the project area. The residential area is predominantly characterized by 2- to 3-story detached houses and apartment buildings. Next slide. And this photo shows a view looking into the proposed site from Borden Avenue. And this is the portion of the site that FDNY has not yet acquired. Next slide. And this photo shows a view looking east into the proposed site from 58th Street. And this is the portion of the site that FDNY is currently using. Next slide. FDNY's current space on part of the site is approximately 58,000 square feet in area and is used for ambulance storage. This is shown in pink on the slide. And the remainder of lot 28 that would be acquired is approximately 89,000 square feet in area and is shown in blue on the slide. There is a 1-story building with a mezzanine built in 1965 located in this portion of the site. And the building contains 31,600 square feet of area, 26 repair bays, and 18-foot ceilings. FDNY proposes to lightly renovate the existing building to serve automotive repair, also parts storage, and administrative uses. FDNY's fleet is complex to maintain and has grown by 27% in the last 2 decades, with other FDNY facilities operating 7 days a week on 2 shifts that range from 6:30 in the morning to 11 at night just to meet demand. One of the purposes of this site would be the relocation of sedan and small vehicle repair functions from a site at, or from a facility at 3003 Review Avenue. And this is one of the facilities that are under strain from the demand. This relocation would allow 14 repair bays at 3003 Review Avenue to be retasked for ambulance repair. Aside from the building, FDNY would use the remainder of the site for vehicle storage, and ultimately 60 staff would be redeployed from other FDNY fleet shops to this site. This would allow vehicles to be parked and repaired on the same site rather than having to transport vehicles to another repair site. Next slide. In summary, FDNY and DCAS are seeking a non-ULURP modification to facilitate acquisition of the remainder of block 2657 lot 28 for vehicle maintenance and repair uses, as well as additional vehicle storage as approved in the 2001 site selection and acquisition. Having more space and a building used for maintenance and repair would allow FDNY to meet its goals of increasing productivity and reducing overtime and costs. Community Board 2 has provided a letter of support explaining their approval of the modification without any notes of concern. And I reached out to Community Board 2 and they've confirmed that they're okay with not referring this application out again. This concludes my presentation. I am happy to answer questions.
Thanks, Teal. This is amending the previous acquisition from 2001 to add an additional 88,000 or so square feet. Is there any limit to the amendment of a prior acquisition that would be beyond our ability to do this as sort of an amendment as opposed to a new acquisition here? I mean, this is the same site. It's the same site. It's right next door. Obviously, it's immediately adjacent. But what allows this to be an amendment of a prior acquisition as opposed to a new acquisition here?
I mean, it's largely that the use on the site wouldn't be changing. So they would be expanding a lot of the same uses across the rest of the site, even though the area is greater.
That's right. So there's no change of use, and there is not capital money being spent on the site to change it. It's actually quite, from my understanding, quite minimal amount of money that they need to spend to sort of make the site work for them. That's why
So,
it's
no capital,
Yep.
Same use, and is it the same? It's the same lot too, right?
Yeah,
It is.
yeah.
Okay, all right. I think that okay, got it. I think that's probably all right. I got it. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Thank you,
Floor is yours.
Chair. This is a lease rather than an outright purchase of this property, correct?
Actually, I might need to check on that and get back with you. I think they might be purchasing the property.
Okay, that's significant. I'd like to know that. And if by chance it is a lease rather than an outright acquisition, I would like to know the term of the lease. But, you know, fundamentally, I'd like to know whether it's a purchase or a lease. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Maybe we can even get you that answer before this is all concluded. Okay, let me see if there are other questions here.
Okay.
Were you going to?
Yeah, I do have the answer. It is a lease. There is not a purchase. I am a person who knows the answer to this question is I can see her typing on Teams. So we may have the term shortly.
The term of the lease. Okay. All right. Good. Let me see if there are other questions while I filibuster for about 10 more seconds here and get Ryan a chance. Okay. Okay. So I don't see any other questions. So what we're going to do.
It's a 20-year lease.
Mr. Vice Chairman, does that answer your question?
I can exhale. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Done. Woo, that was a good 35, 40 seconds. You're holding your breath. Okay. Thank you for that. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to seek assent by a voice vote here to send an approval letter to the FDNY that this is a non-ULURP modification. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Okay. Thank you all very much. We have assent. Let's move on to the next Queens non-ULURP. Ryan.
Sure. So the fifth item on our agenda is a referral of an authorization in Queens Community District 1. Our presenter is Scott Solomon.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. So we can move on to the next slide. Thank you. So Queens Plaza North, New York LLC is requesting a zoning authorization to allow a 48,696 square foot floor area bonus in exchange for mass transit station improvements, which would facilitate a 26-story mixed-use building consisting of approximately 417 homes and ground floor commercial space at 2501 Queens Plaza North in the Long Island City neighborhood in Queens Community District 1. In 2021, the Zoning for Accessibility, or ZFA text amendment, co-sponsored by the MTA and DCP, was adopted. Developers are required to coordinate with the MTA to set aside space where needed for accessibility infrastructure in high-density buildings. This is done through the form of an easement requirement that is certified by the chair of the CPC. Additionally, ZFA also incentivizes private developers through a transit improvement bonus program through additional coordination with the MTA to plan station access improvements, for which the developer can utilize a zoning floor area bonus subject to a CPC authorization. This is the first transit bonus authorization application outside of Manhattan to come before the CPC. Next slide. Queens Plaza, development site is located in the Long Island City Central Business District, an area characterized by a variety of land uses, including high-density mixed-use residential and commercial buildings, multifamily residences, commercial office buildings, industrial uses, and parking community facilities. Buildings range in height from 1-story commercial buildings to 58-story mixed-use buildings. The development site is located in an M15 R9 zoning district within the Queens Plaza sub-district of the Special Long Island City Mixed-Use District, which was established to support the continuing growth of mixed-use neighborhoods by permitting moderate to high-density commercial and residential uses in transit-accessible areas and encourage development of housing production. The maximum permitted FAR is 8 for residential, commercial, community facility, industrial uses. The development site fronts Queens Plaza, a 250-foot wide roadway comprising Queens Plaza North and South, the Queensboro Bridge Greenway, and an elevated subway. 2 blocks east of the development site includes the intersection of Northern Boulevard and Queens Boulevard near the Queens Plaza subway station. The western portion of the surrounding area includes the vehicular approach to the Queensboro Bridge, and the development site is well served by public transit, including the Queensboro Plaza subway station with access to the 7 and W lines immediately across the street from the development site and connected by an existing pedestrian bridge to the development site, the Queens Plaza subway station 800 feet to the east, and the Queens Bridge station approximately 1,200 feet to the northwest, and several bus routes also have stops at the development site. Next slide. The development site is an irregularly shaped corner through lot with approximately 201 feet of frontage in Queens Plaza North, 170 feet of frontage on Crescent Street to the west, and 153 feet of frontage on 27th Street. The site has an area of approximately 30,435 square feet and is currently improved with a 2-story commercial and office building with surface parking. The existing building contains an MTA staircase within an existing transit easement that provides access between the Queens Plaza North sidewalk to a second-level pedestrian bridge, which connects to the mezzanine level and pay area of the Queensboro Plaza subway station, above which there are 2 additional platform levels, one providing northbound, the other providing southbound service. Next slide. Queensboro Plaza is a completely non-ADA accessible station. Currently, access is limited to 2 staircases located on Queens Plaza North and South, which connect 2 corresponding pedestrian bridges to the mezzanine level. Next slide. However, work is already underway for an MTA accessibility project, which will bring the Queensboro Plaza station into ADA compliance. Among those improvements is a new elevator at Queens Plaza South that will connect the street to the mezzanine, and an elevator that connects the mezzanine to the 2 platform levels located in the eastern portion of the station. This work is expected to be completed by September 2024. Next slide. Here we have a view of the eastern portion of the development site with a clear view of the existing 2nd-story pedestrian bridge that connects to the Queensboro Plaza station. Next slide. Here we have a western view of that pedestrian bridge from the Queensboro Bridge Greenway development site to the right. Next slide. We're zooming in to the development site. This is a view of the existing non-accessible staircase that connects to the pedestrian bridge within the development site. So we're standing on Queens Plaza North here. Next slide. Are we on slide 10? Oh, thank you. Sorry about that. Here we have a view from within the development site looking towards the pedestrian bridge that connects to the station in the background. Next slide. And here we have a view of the internal staircase looking down towards the street level, or what leads to the street level. Next slide. Here we have a view of the 27th Street frontage. Next slide. And there's a southern view of the Crescent Street frontage, including the surface parking. Next slide. And the following 2 photos were taken earlier this year and show temporary stairs that have been added while demolition is currently underway for the development site. Above is an eastern view of the temporary stairs at Queens Plaza North connecting to the pedestrian bridge with the development site on the left. And next slide. Here's a northwest view of the temporary stairs from the pedestrian bridge with the development site in the background. Next slide. In terms of the proposed development, the requested authorization would facilitate a new 26-story mixed-use, predominantly residential building. This would contain approximately 369,000 square feet, 359,000 square feet of residential floor area, or about 417 homes, and 7,400 square feet of ground floor commercial space. The building would rise to a height of 311 feet, including a 28-foot high bulkhead along Queens Plaza North, 125 feet in height along Crescent Street and 27th Street. 0 parking spaces are proposed, none are required in the special LIC mixed use district, and there will be 144 bicycle parking spaces and interior loading berth. The building would have a floor area ratio of 9.6, which represents a 20% increase from the maximum 8.0 without transit improvements. This represents a floor area bonus of 48,696 square feet. An as-of-right building would comprise a 19-story, similarly mixed-use building, but would be limited to 343 dwelling units. Next slide. And that would be a building without transit improvements. On April 6, 2022, the MTA issued a letter stating that the agency and the applicant had agreed on the station improvements that would, for the MTA, be necessary for the property owner to obtain a floor area bonus for the subject property pursuant to ZR Section 6651. The letter also serves as the MTA's final letter of approval of the proposed station improvements, and also notes that the property owner would be responsible for the perpetual maintenance and capital replacement of the station's improvements. And then on April 21st, 2022, the executed agreement with the MTA was recorded against the property and is publicly available on ACRIS, the city's online register. The proposed significant accessibility improvements are contained within a proposed 43,884 cubic foot transit volume, which includes 2,588 square feet of transit area. This includes the replacement and widening of an 8-foot 8-inch staircase and pedestrian circulation space to 10 feet 1 inch, the installation of a new elevator to provide ADA access from the street level to the subway station's mezzanine level. Pardon me. The replacement of the existing sidewalk entrance to a larger internal circulation space with elevator lobby that improves wayfinding and enhances site security and serves as a new civic amenity, and an elevator machine and electrical panel room. The pedestrian bridge itself is not on the development site and will continue to be the responsibility of the MTA. The accessibility improvements would be built by the developer, who again would be responsible for building and maintaining in perpetuity. Next slide. Above is a street level site plan, representing approximately half of the 43,000 square foot transit volume and half the 2,500 square foot transit area. This includes the elevator lobby, which is accessed from Queens Plaza North. To the left are the widened 10-foot 1-inch stairs. Behind that, an elevator machine room, electrical panel room, and then to the northeast, the elevator. Next slide. Here is a pedestrian bridge level site plan showing the stairs and then landing, additional lobby and circulation space, and the elevator, and then pedestrian bridge access. Next slide. And then this is a site plan of the cellar level showing the elevator pit. Next slide. Here's a section facing east with the elevator pit and lobby to the left, pedestrian bridge over Queens Plaza to the right. Next slide. This is a section facing west, showing stairs, electrical panel room, and the lobby circulation space. Next slide. This is a section facing north with stairs to the left, ground level entrance doors to the lobby, elevator and pit to the right. Next slide. And here we have the following are 3 photos of interior renderings. The first is of the second level looking south towards a pedestrian bridge, stairs to the right. Next slide. The second illustrative rendering looking southeast from the first staircase landing. Next slide. And the third showing the street level lobby, stairs, and elevator, and the non-public doors to the elevator machine and electric panel rooms. Next slide. Currently, access to the station from Queens Plaza North is provided by those set staircases to the mezzanine, including at the development site, severely restricting access to those with mobility issues. To facilitate the significant accessibility improvements described before, the application is requesting a CPC authorization, again pursuant ZR Section 6651, to permit the 48,000 square foot floor area bonus in exchange for these improvements. ZR 6651 allows up to 20% floor area bonus, which is being sought by the applicant. Next slide. The authorization is a discretionary action that grants additional floor area for providing transit improvements. Since the authorization applies to many stations with their own unique configuration and accessibility needs, the realm of improvements needed at these stations are not predetermined or standardized and are evaluated on a case-by-case basis. Rather than having a predetermined list of improvements and associated bonus floor area, improvements pursuant to this authorization are subject to commission findings. These findings ensure that the proposal would enhance access and/or capacity in the station in a significant way. And this often includes the provision of elevators, additional station entrances, mezzanine expansion, or platform upgrade, to list out a few examples. That said, when determining how much floor area should be granted for a transit improvement proposal, past projects provide some guidance. The Sedesco authorization provides some precedent and was approved recently by the CPC, and included floor area bonuses that were in proportion with the subject application and the 48,696 square feet of bonus floor area, again, of the subject application. Additionally, the list of improvements in East Midtown is a good reference point for evaluating transit improvement proposals. However, the evaluation of improvements for one specific area or station does not always translate neatly to improvements in other parts of the city. And for that reason is why the authorization includes the flexibility that is needed to address all types of stations across the city. Next slide. Per the ZR 51, in order to grant the floor area bonus, CPC shall confirm the application meets the findings, including that the public benefit of the mass transit improvements merit the amount of additional floor area being granted. Improvements constitute significant enhancements for those with physical disabilities or improved ingress-egress routes and improved capacity. And the improvements constitute significant enhancements to the station environment or its function. The applicant has addressed these findings, and they are included in the briefing materials and filed application. In conclusion, next slide. In conclusion, the applicant respectfully requests the CPC grant the zoning authorization because per the applicant, the station improvements will benefit the MTA, New York City Transit, and the riding public. The Queensboro Plaza Station, located high above the street, has long restricted access to the most vulnerable commuters within Long Island City's central business district. These new improvements, including a new entrance and street elevator, constitute a significant public benefit and would be consistent in terms of magnitude and scope of other applications that have previously received a corresponding 20% increase in permitted floor area. Thank you, and that concludes the presentation.
Great, thanks, Scott. So this is a really interesting one, and interesting because the first time that zoning for accessibility has been, for transit accessibility has been used outside of Manhattan. So it makes it doubly and triply interesting. I just wanted to probe on one point here, and it relates to the connection between the floor area and the improvements. Because under the provision of 6651, they're seeking 48,000 square feet of additional floor area in exchange for mass transit. The MTA seems super excited about all of this. I can't blame them. I think it's an impressive set of improvements for sure, and will add to access to that station. But the question for you and for the department is, how does the commission make the determination that these improvements are enough to warrant the density bonus that they're seeking?
So it is a qualitative analysis. There isn't, again, a set sort of menu of improvements. So this conversation is done in concert between the applicant and the MTA. So the MTA agrees, has the agreement that they execute that lays out the improvements that they have sought. We also look at precedent. So we've looked at other cases have proportional improvements. The primary improvement is always at minimum an elevator providing vertical accessibility improvements. But then there's other improvements that also add to the degree of improvements. One, the widening, specifically the widening of the stairways, the enlargement of the circulation space, moving from just a street level off-ramping of pedestrians onto the street to this interior space, not just from the benefit of maybe protection from the weather, but an improved internal circulation space. So that's primarily the significant improvements here. And while MTA is proposing improvements on Queens Plaza South and within the platform to connect to the platforms, if someone were to need access from this Queens Plaza South, they would have to cross a 200-foot wide roadway. So this is another qualitative assessment of the vast improvements here compared to, there is a transit easement here. It could be a much smaller easement volume fitting just an elevator and sort of an in-kind replacement of stairs. So this improvement here, MTA deems as a significant improvement.
See, the thing that I'm concerned about with relying too much on the MTA for this is obvious. The MTA would be willing to grant any density bonus for whatever it is they need. So really what I'm interested in is how or what level of detail that we have reviewed in comparison to precedent and other standards. And I believe you have done this, but I just want to make it clear that that the department believes that 48,000 square feet is warranted here based on what has been done previously and what this commission has done previously. Because, you know, what one could ask the question, why is it 48,000? Well, why shouldn't we do 38,000 or 28,000 here? And it would be a reasonable question for somebody to ask. So I want to just pose it that way. And
yeah, no, I think the precedent was definitely what we looked at. So the East Midtown, that was 40,000 square foot for an elevator. So that's almost a 1-for-1 scale here. I believe this 45 Broad is another case for 2 elevators for 70,000 square feet. And I believe the Sedesco site was close as well as far as a proportionate 20% bonus. Boy, that number is escaping me in Sedesco, but it's around 50,000 square feet of bonus for similar 1-for-1 improvements.
okay, and I will note for the commission, we will surely see more of these too. So it's important that we have useful precedents and that we are not veering from them, because otherwise, we won't have any standards to abide by in making the tie between density and the improvements here. Okay, thank you very much, Scott. Let me go to Commissioner Burney.
Yeah, just following on that theme. I mean, it is tricky because you could, on the face of it, you could say, well, 48,000 square feet, Commissioner Edie could give us an estimate of what that's worth in terms of real estate. And you could estimate the cost of doing the physical improvements for the MTA and see if there was a balance, a match there. But there are other factors, right? The developer has to maintain this place forever in terms of maintenance and policing and so on. You've got the sort of permanence of the amenity that lasts forever. So it's not just a sort of cash transaction, right? So I think it might be interesting, though, to at least in the interest of transparency, lay out what the sort of guidelines are. What are the criteria by which you actually assess, or the MTA actually assesses whether the quid pro quo is of benefit to the city?
I would just want to jump in here because I think there is, and I appreciate this conversation. I think it's a great conversation, but there is it is hard to compare these, quite so simply. We use the precedent, we look at the areas, but also there is also some individual neighborhood and planning context that we're looking at here in terms of the value that is sort of attached to these improvements. And Scott alluded to them, that if someone had to access an elevator, they would have to cross a very wide street. Well, that may not be the case in the Sedesco site. And there's also a difference in the density of these types of infrastructure, between Manhattan and Long Island City. And so, there's an argument that the value of the improvements is perhaps higher here, but we've not made that. We don't want there to be a lower bar, obviously, in an outer borough. And so, I think that there is there's some subjectivity here, and that the commission as a body and also as individuals have to decide, in some ways for themselves, what is the appropriate bar. The department will, we can make a recommendation. We can give you information. If there's questions about things, we can help flesh those out. But at the end of the day, though, the commissioners, this is a subjective finding, and it is a discretionary finding that the commission has to make.
And Ryan, just to follow up that to Commissioner Burney, was, that the bonus floor area is not based on the cost of improvements, it's based on the benefits provided to the benefit to the public.
Yeah.
And that's something that's been clarified by another comment.
Difficult things to put a price on, I know.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner Burney. Let me see if there are other questions here. Okay, seeing none, we're going to refer this one to the community board for 30 days, Ryan. So thank you for that. And now we are on to our pre-hearings for this Wednesday.
That's right.
Ryan, do you want to tell us about the first?
Sure. The sixth item on our agenda is a pre-hearing review of a zoning map amendment in Queens Community District 11. Scott will present on this one as well.
Great. I almost forgot I was just right after. I almost stepped away. We can move on to the next slide. So this is a private application by Kenfa Madison LLC, aka Mizumi Restaurant. They're requesting a zoning map amendment to facilitate a horizontal enlargement of an existing eating and drinking establishment at 23106 Northern Boulevard in the Douglaston neighborhood of Queens Community District 11. Next slide. The project area fronts the south side of Northern Boulevard between the boundaries of Alley Pond Park to the west and 234th Street to the east. The surrounding area primarily consists of Alley Pond Park and the Alley Pond Golf Center and non-conforming commercial and light industrial buildings, fronting the southern side of Northern Boulevard, a 100-foot wide street that serves as the primary east-west thoroughfare and commercial corridor. To the east of the intersection of Douglaston Parkway and Northern Boulevard, there are several 6 to 7 story residential buildings within an R6A district and low-rise local retail within an R12 C12 zoning district. The rest of the surrounding area including the project area is zone R12, which is limited to single-family detached homes only. The project area is approximately 1/3 mile east of the Cross Island Parkway, and the Long Island Railroad Douglaston Station is 1/3 mile to the northeast of the project area. Next slide, please. Compared to the previous area map, the area on screen is rotated, and we are now looking south into the project area with the golf center in the foreground. The project area includes the entirety of 11 tax lots. All current legal non-conforming uses in the project area are operating pursuant to previous BSA approvals and extensions, all approved at some point by CB11, including the extensions. The proposed development site to the far right or west consists of 7 tax lots, which would be merged, creating an approximately 68,000 square foot interior zoning lot. It consists of a 7,000 square foot non-conforming restaurant, a family-owned and operated business opened in 2010. The vacant portion of the development site that would include the proposed enlargement was previously used as a gas station and is seen in the bottom right corner of the development site above. Moving east or to the left, there is a car wash, a vacant building, last used as a house of worship, then a portion of a mapped but unbuilt street, and then 2 automotive repair shops. Next slide. Here on the left, in the eastern view of the Northern Boulevard development site to the right, photo on the right, a view of the development site from Northern Boulevard looking south. Next slide. And then on the left, view of the project area facing southeast from Northern Boulevard. In the center of that photo is the car wash, restaurant to the right of it, house vacant building to the left. And then the photo on the right, we're looking more into that house worship with Alley Pond in the background and one of the automotive uses to the left there. Next slide. In terms of the proposed development, the rezoning would facilitate approximately 15,834 square foot horizontal enlargement to the existing 1-story restaurant. Proposed enlarged building would have approximately 22,910 square feet of floor area on 2 stories, 183 attended parking spaces, an increase from 105 currently would be provided. Approximately 76 are required, and access is provided by 2 existing curb cuts in Northern Boulevard. Just want to correct, I said attended, this is 183 delineated spaces. Next slide. This illustrates existing building highlighted in blue, the proposed enlargement highlighted in red to the west. Site plan includes a 15-foot wide sidewalk condition. The builder's pavement plan will be subject to DOB review. the proposed and existing front yard landscaping, proposed perimeter plantings, and surface parking lot, which includes additional planting islands. Next slide. Facilitate proposed enlargement. Applicant proposes zoning map amendment to establish the C22 commercial overlay on the existing R12. The zoning depth aligns, district depth aligns with the rear property lines of the lots within the proposed area. Proposed project area. The existing R12 zoning would continue to only allow single-family detached homes for residential uses. The proposed C22 overlay would also bring the existing restaurant into conformance, and the existing auto repair shops would remain legal but non-conforming uses. Next slide. CB11 voted to recommend disapproval by a vote of 40 to 0 with 4 abstentions, expressing preference for ad hoc BSA review. Next slide. And then Queensborough President recommends disapprove with the condition that the rezoning area be limited to the development site only, that the other sites should continue to seek relief from the BSA, a commitment to local and MWBE hiring, and sustainable measures be incorporated into the building. Next slide. For the applicant, the land use rationale is to reinforce the existing commercial character of this particular portion of Northern Boulevard to better integrate and transition the commercial corridor to the existing C12 commercial overlay located to the east, providing stable zoning predictability to the subject properties and bring non-conforming uses into conformance. Concludes the presentation. And again, this is have a hearing on Wednesday.
Great. Thanks, Scott. So the community board has supported in the past the existence of this restaurant through the BSA variance process. Is that correct?
Correct. And not only they supported this BSA application, but every existing commercial use has been approved by the community board. Who is
okay?
Yeah.
Okay. And the community board voted, however, 40 to 0 against this this change, a 2-story horizontal enlargement, because it wanted to retain the BSA ad hoc approach. So continuing to go through variances on BSA. What can you say a little bit more about what the interest of the community board is here in retaining that ad hoc approach as opposed to normalizing the zoning here and bringing these commercial uses into conformity, or at least closer, and for some of them closer to conformity?
Sure. I think the primary preference for the BSA route is provides an opportunity, one, to engage with these applicants and to provide conditions. Oftentimes you'll have hours of operation conditions, some very detailed conditions of how a business operates, things that go beyond zoning. So they feel they have an opportunity to have a site-by-site control of a property. And it's those conditions that they can levy is the mode that they prefer.
Have they demanded conditions in the variance process through BSA previously? Is there an issue that they're actually trying to address, or is it a matter of just retaining some level of control?
It's retaining some level of control. So this same exact proposed enlargement that they approved, I don't recall specific conditions. There likely were about hours of operation. But the site-specific approval that the BSA provides, they approved, so the community board nearly unanimously supported this application for this same degree of enlargement.
Okay, all right, got it. Okay.
Sorry.
I think that, yeah.
Okay. Sorry. I was just going to say the secondary issue is that there was a contingent of community board members who preferenced that this site be absorbed into Alley Pond Parkland. This is all private property. This is something that came up. It was just quite common. If not secondary, was alongside with the BSA preference. They thought the city should absorb it, but there are no current plans for the city to acquire these properties.
Right, understandably. I mean, it is right. I see it is sandwiched right in the middle of Alley Pond Park, but also so is Northern Boulevard, transversing this park, and this commercial strip is right there, and it looks like, I mean, well, it doesn't sound like anybody from the city has ever expressed any interest in absorbing it or exercising eminent domain here, nor should they. So, okay, so this is an interesting one. All right, I got it. Let me see if there are questions, comments from the panel. All right, well, seeing none, we will send this one off to a public hearing, Scott, on Wednesday. Thank you for your work on this, as always. And Ryan will go to item 7.
Right. The 7th item on our agenda, a pre-hearing review of a zoning map and zoning text amendment, special permit authorization and city map change in Queens Community District 1. And Teal is back to present this.
Hello again. You can please go to the next slide. This is a private application by Astoria Owners LLC for a series of land use actions to facilitate approximately 1 million square feet of development in Astoria, Community Board 1 of Queens. The requested land use actions include a zoning map amendment from M11 to R73C24, a zoning text amendment to map a mandatory inclusionary housing area option 1, a waterfront special permit to waive regulations on height, setback, tower size, and maximum width of walls facing the shoreline, a waterfront authorizations to modify requirements within the waterfront public access area, as well as a waterfront authorization for phase development of the waterfront access area. And the last action is a city map amendment to demap the portion of 3rd Street between 26th Avenue and the East River. Next slide, please. The project area, as outlined in the dashed red line, is located on the Hallett's Point Peninsula on the East River waterfront. 2 major prior land use approvals in the surrounding area include Hallett's Point and Astoria Cove. Hallett's Point includes 34 acres of land located in the westernmost portion of the peninsula, for which a large-scale general development plan and related actions were approved by the City Planning Commission in 2013. The development will consist of approximately 3 million square feet of residential uses that is located across 11 buildings. These 11 buildings will range in height from 11 to 31 stories. And the development would also include waterfront esplanade and a public school building. To date, only one of the buildings has been constructed. Astoria Cove includes a 9-acre area located east of the project area. The City Planning Commission approved a large-scale general development plan and related actions in 2014 for a development that will include 1.7 million square feet of residential and retail uses across 5 buildings, ranging in height from 12 to 32 stories, as well as a public elementary school and a waterfront esplanade. And construction on this site has not yet commenced. Together, these developments are anticipated to facilitate over 4,000 housing units, including 800 affordable units through the voluntary inclusionary housing program. The area to the east and southeast of the project area is predominantly characterized by low-rise warehouses, vacant industrial buildings, and open storage yards with a handful of 1- and 2-family residential uses. The area to the northeast of the project area is characterized by high-density residential waterfront development and open space, including the 23-story Shore Towers condominium development and the 65-acre Astoria Park. Additional open space includes Whitey Ford Field, which is a 4-acre waterfront baseball park located 1 block west of the project area, and Hallett's Cove Playground, which is a 6-acre playground and waterfront esplanade that extends across the southern portion of the peninsula. Combined, approximately 9 acres of open space is also planned for the Hallett's Point and Astoria Cove esplanades. The New York City Housing Authority Astoria houses, consisting of 1,100 units across 22 6- and 7-story buildings on a 27-acre campus, encompasses the southern half of the Hallett's Peninsula. The surrounding area is served by several modes of public transit, including 4 bus lines and the NNW trains, which are accessible via the Astoria Boulevard and 30th Street subway stations, which are located approximately 1 mile east and southeast of the project area, respectively. Additionally, the Astoria stop of the NYC ferry is approximately a half-mile south of the project area with service to Long Island City, East 34th Street and Wall Street, and a city bike station is located on 27th Avenue and 3rd Street, approximately 1 block south of the project area. Next slide. The requested actions would facilitate the development of a mixed-use building with 3 building segments that would contain a total of approximately 1 million square feet of floor area at 6 FAR. This would include 1,400 dwelling units, 1,800 square feet of commercial floor area, 22,000 square feet of community facility floor area, 525 accessory parking spaces, and approximately 1 acre of publicly accessible open space. The proposed development would include 350 permanently affordable units pursuant to option 1 of the Mandatory Inclusionary Housing or MIH program. Next slide. The proposed development would consist of 3 building segments that increase in height as the development approaches the East River waterfront. Segment 1 would front on 26th Avenue and rise to a maximum height of 238 feet or 23 stories. Segment 2 would be located along 3rd Street and rise to a maximum height of 318 feet or 31 stories. And segment 3 would be located at the end of 3rd Street facing the East River and rise to a maximum height of 350 feet or 34 stories. The base heights across the segments would range in height from 10 stories to 25 stories. Given the long facade, the applicants have employed strategies such as setbacks along 3rd Street to break up the massing and create more of an undulating effect on the facade. Due to the project area's location within flood zone AE, the proposed development would be elevated approximately 8 to 9 feet, such that it would be approximately 3 feet above the base floodplain. Next slide. This massing shows another view of the proposed development looking north from 26th Avenue, illustrating how the tower heights increase towards the waterfront. Next slide. Non-residential uses would be located in the base of the building, mostly concentrated along 26th Avenue to provide amenities and retail to the surrounding area. 1,800 square feet of retail space would be located on the ground floor, and 16,000 square feet of community facility space would be located in the 2nd story, both fronting on 26th Avenue. An additional community facility space totaling 5,000 square feet would be located in building segment 2. One of the strategies to break up the long facade includes proposed townhome style residential units with garden stoops and entrances that open directly on 3rd Street in building segment 2. The ground floor of building segment 3 would include a 7,000 square foot lounge for building residents in the eastern portion facing the waterfront. A parking garage containing 525 accessory parking spaces and 525 bicycle parking spaces would be located within the interior portions of the building in the cellar through the 3rd floor. This would be accessible via a 25-foot curb cut on 26th Avenue and an entrance on 3rd Street between segments 2 and 3. A 50-foot loading zone would also be located in front of the residential entrance to segment 1 on 3rd Street. Next slide. Starting from the left of the illustration, the publicly accessible areas would consist of a corner plaza adjacent to 26th Street and the retail space, and then a 2-way 50-foot wide unmapped street for pedestrian and vehicular use that functions as the upland connection, and then a vehicle turnaround at the end of the upland connection to facilitate FDNY access to the entirety of the site. And finally, a waterfront esplanade that runs along the entire length of the development site, fronting on the East River with oyster-shaped rain gardens, terraced and turfed seating areas along the waterfront, and 5 fitness stations. A new addition since certification to the waterfront public access area is an overlook feature along the shoreline. The overlook deck stems from a strong desire from Community Board 1 for more interaction with the waterfront that the applicant is seeking to include. Although not included within the certification materials presented on March 28th, we are in the process of reviewing this feature. The feature would be 1,400 square feet in area with 2 connections to the shore public walkway, one of which would be ADA accessible and one of which includes steps. The feature itself would be fully ADA accessible and is proposed to have an open mesh decking surface that offers porosity to the shoreline below. Next slide. The proposed development would introduce a diverse planting palette, including street and canopy trees along 3rd Street, seaward plantings, a meadow plant mix, and rain garden plant mixes, which will diversify the waterfront area. And this view also shows the proposed overlook. Next slide. The applicant is requesting a number of modifications that largely stem from the proposed driveway on 3rd Street and the irregular, challenging shape of the site. The vehicle driveway and drop-off features are not permitted, but the irregular shape of the site makes locating these features elsewhere challenging. Further stemming from this programming of the upland connection, the applicant is striving to produce a design that creates an upland connection that feels pedestrianized while facilitating some vehicle circulation. Shade trees would be provided within the visual corridor, flanking pedestrian paths on either side of the driveway, but the continuous tree pit would be interrupted by the vehicle drop-off area. And boulders would be installed to separate vehicle and pedestrian areas. And this is instead of the more typical 30-inch tall bollards. And these boulders, instead of bollards, interfere with the 8-foot required pedestrian clear path, so that the clear path would at some points be 7 feet. And the applicant is also requesting certain reduced planting requirements. And within the transition area or vehicle drop-off area, the planting requirements would be reduced from 40% to 31.87%, and the depth of one of the 2 supplemental public access areas would be reduced. Within the waterfront esplanade, the lawn requirement would be reduced from 25% of the required planting area to 17.3%, and this would provide the terraced features relating to the oyster motifs. Other modifications include raising the visual corridor to comply with flood zone regulations, shifting the bike rack location, and modification of lighting requirements to suit the overall proposed design of the site. Next slide, please. A notice of completion of a draft environmental impact statement was issued on March 25th, 2022. The analysis found the potential for significant adverse impacts for schools, early childhood programs, active open space, noise, transportation, and construction, and no other significant adverse impacts were identified. We're in the process of providing mitigation measures that will be further studied between these draft and final EIS. Next slide. Community Board 1 voted to approve this application with 19 in favor, 14 against, and 2 abstaining. Their recommendations include providing a comfort station at Whitey Ford Field, which is the public park located to the east of the development site, as well as including an on-site accessory power generator that preferably uses geothermal energy, and also continuing to pursue approvals for the proposed walkway extension over the water or the waterfront overlook. Next slide. The borough president also approved with conditions. Some of these conditions relate to community board concerns around expanding and deepening affordability of units, promoting affordable housing and community benefits to the local residents, and committing to the use of geothermal energy sources. And several other conditions relate to EIS impacts, including making improvements to Triborough Park and Astoria houses for open space, and working with transit and DOT on bike lanes and the bus network to and from the site. And on this slide, I'll conclude my presentation and happy to take questions.
Great, thank you, Teal. Let me see if there are questions before we see this for a public hearing on Wednesday. Commissioner Burney, it's all yours.
Oh, thank you. Just a quick question, Teal. I'm trying to understand, when we saw this project in March, it seemed to be bigger. Is that because this is a phase of that bigger project, or has it been modified since we saw it in March?
It has not. The bulk has not been modified since we saw it in March. The bulk hasn't changed at all.
Okay, because I had in my notes 2,644 units, 483 affordable. Why did I write that down?
I am not sure that.
What had you written down, Commissioner?
I had written down 2,644 units, of which 483 were affordable.
I don't know.
Then I wrote down 3 phases. So I'm wondering, is this part?
You
is
have
this the phase?
Yeah, 3 segments. There's segment 1, segment 2, and segment 3. Maybe that's what you're referring to.
Commissioner Burney, that sounds suspiciously like Innovation Queens.
I wrote Hallett's North.
Oh, okay. I just, so the phasing did sounds like that
was, so my second question was going to be, if this is one phase, what's going on with the other phases, I guess? Is it a phased project or is it all going ahead at one?
This is a phased project. There's 3 building segments that would each be part of a phase, but that would bring the total dwelling units to the 1,400 dwelling units. There are 2 other projects on the peninsula that might make things a little confusing because we also have Astoria Cove to the east and Hallett's Point to the west. And both Sri and I in these presentations have rattled off a lot of dwelling unit numbers.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, probably my confusion. Okay. That's all right. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Marin.
Oh, you're on mute, Commissioner Marin.
Oh, sorry, I had it on 2 places mute. So yeah, I too have concerns about the number of affordable units as well as the concern of phasing. But overall, I'm just a bit more concerned about the amount of green space and plantings that are being reduced, specifically since we have a project that's in a high water area. And I'd like to understand the justification for that other than more building space.
Yes, a big part.
Oh, and I'm sorry, and one more thing to add, the school. So in terms of the phasing, my concern was when the school's coming on, knowing that all these housing units are coming online before the school. I'm sorry, please continue.
Yeah, so I'm starting with the open space. Part of why this kind of 3rd street driveway or vehicle access space as part of the upland connection is because FDNY needs to be able to access all of the site, including that 3rd building segment so deep in this L-shaped site. And the applicant has really struggled to design a building that would allow that access in a different way. So then because of that upland connection and the radius of the motor court in which the FDNY would need to be able to use to have vehicles move around, it then kind of has a ricochet impact on some of the planting requirements because then that transition area has some of these specific rules, such as I think it was the 40% planting requirement that has to be reduced and some of the depth has to be reduced. So that's one of the reasons why the planting requirements in that specific area are reduced. But then looking at the lawn, it's not so much that the planting requirement is reduced as much as it's just not a lawn. It's more of this terrace seating, which doesn't count as a lawn requirement. And that's where that authorization comes into play.
Understood. And what would you say for the phasing of the school in reference to the rest of the developments that are going on and a number of school units in the community?
So that is a tricky question. I might defer to Alexis because I think she is also on this call.
Hi, yes. So in the case of our sort of school impact issues here, we're in a district where there is an impact with a no action scenario because the schools in this district are oversubscribed. The impact is not to the extent that we would actually see an entirely new school assigned to a project of this scale. And so they are still in the process of negotiating what sort of mitigation measure is going to be addressing the school impact here. And so we'll have more in follow-up sessions to provide detail on that front.
Thank you, Alexis. I appreciate that. And then, of course, the most important, I think that we all think about is the number of affordable units that would be. And I understand this is voluntary. Is there any way of kind of cajoling the applicant to include more units?
They are already utilizing option 1, and so within MIH, that offers like the deepest level of affordability, and they have made some other agreements to get the word out about these affordable housing. And I think we are still in some conversations with the applicant and in public review about whether they could provide more. That's something that they could likely speak to though on Wednesday.
Thank you.
Thank you, too. Thank you,
Yep.
Alexis. I appreciate it.
I'm sorry, Commissioner, I wanted to make that's all you had, right? I didn't mean to interrupt you, Commissioner.
That would be it. Thank you. Thank you,
Okay.
Chair. That's it.
All right, okay. Okay, let me see if there are other questions, comments. Okay, I see none. I will note that one thing I would like to hear from the applicant on Wednesday is a little bit more exploration of the layout of the site. It feels very jammed in there, and obviously I share Commissioner Marin's concerns about number of units, number of affordable units, et cetera. So I'm not eager to do things that would inhibit the ability to create housing here. However, I also think that we need to take a look at the site plan and site design because it looks very bulky, very chunky. It is and I'm going to find a thesaurus to find all the other ways to say that same set of words. But the plan needs some work and needs a little breathing room there. So we will address that too on Wednesday. Okay. All right, terrific. So we're going to bring that to a public hearing, and in case we don't see you, Teal, although I mean there's no more Queen's items today. Otherwise I would have thought we would see you again. But thank you for your work, Alexis. Thanks for your support and leadership on all this stuff. So that one's going to a public hearing. Let's go to the Bronx pre-hearings next, Ryan.
All right. The 8th item on our agenda is a pre-hearing review of a zoning map and zoning text amendment in the Bronx Community District 9. And Manny Lagares is our presenter. Manny?
Okay, good afternoon, commissioners. This is the 1810 Randall Avenue rezoning, which is coming back for review session, pre-hearing. Next slide, please. The applicant is the Second Pentecostal Church of God, La Hermosa and Vertical Community Development, LLC. They are requesting a zoning map amendment from R4A C12 and R5 C12 to R6 C12. They're also requesting a zoning text amendment to Appendix F of the zoning resolution designating the rezoning area as an MIH area. Next slide, please. The project is located in the Soundview section of Bronx Community District 9 on Block 3522, lots 38, 45, and 47. The development site is outlined in yellow and consists of a house of worship and a parking area. Next slide, please. The area map shows the development site and the surrounding low-density residential and community facility uses. Higher density residential is located 3 blocks away, just to the left or to the west of the development site. Next slide. This is a view looking south at the accessory parking lot for the existing house of worship. Next slide, please. And this is a view of the development site showing the house of worship and the adjacent 4 commercial storefronts. 1 storefront is currently vacant. Next slide, please. The zoning change map indicates the existing zoning in the area, which is R4A and R5, which allow low-rise residential uses. The map on the right shows the establishment of the R6 district, which is seen in the dotted area, which would allow the proposed development, which is an 8-story mixed-use building. Next slide, please. The other action is the zoning text amendment, which would designate the rezoning area as an MIH area, with option 1 accounting for 42 income restricted dwelling units, while option 2 accounts for 51 income restricted units. Next slide, please. The site plan indicates the 8-story building, and it steps down as it approaches the lower density homes just to the south of the lot. This will lessen the impact on the adjacent small homes. In addition, the applicant is providing an 8-foot side yard between the development and the small homes. Next slide, please. The ground floor plan indicates the chapel, which the congregation access at Randall Avenue, and also the residential access also on Randall Avenue. The area in blue is an activity room for the house of worship, followed by the seating area for the congregation, 216 seats, and further is the area for the chapel. There's also parking for 16 cars, and the units above, from the upper floors will be heirs units, a total of 167 units. 150 would be heirs units. Next slide, please. And this is a revised drawing as requested by the commission when this project was certified on February 28th. As you can see, they have signage on the building, and they also included windows as you go back and approach the location of the house of worship where the sitting area is and chapel area. Next slide, please. Community Board number 9 unanimously approved the application by a vote of 29-0-0 with the following conditions. The Community Board usually refers to these conditions as a community benefits package, in which they try to, and the applicant has agreed to this, in which they try to have the applicants hire minority and women-owned contracting companies, and also to provide service jobs for the work on these on the building for District 9 first, and then the rest of the Bronx. They also want the applicant to provide or blend in the local park and school in any of their community programs that they have. They would also like on-site security and also exterior lighting and cameras to be located at the entrances of the proposed building. The borough president approved this application. Next slide, please. If there is another slide. No, there isn't. Sorry about that. At the review session, there were concerns the commission had, and as you can see, the applicant did provide a revised rendering as the commission requested with the signage and the provision of the windows. I've also asked the applicants to provide unit counts because there was a concern about the studio units versus the one-bedroom units, and how are these differentiated. Also, the applicant is only providing 150 heirs units, and there was a question, what happens to the other 17? And the applicant has been working on this and will respond to the commission at this Wednesday's public hearing. Also, there was a concern from the commission as to any historical information on heirs units and the marketability of these units. And again, the applicant will respond to these concerns. Are there any questions by the commission?
Great, thank you, Manny. Let's see.
Welcome.
Commissioner Marine.
Sure, thank you, Chair. No questions, Manny. Just really excited to hear from the applicant specifically on those questions that we asked, because
yes,
one of the biggest concerns, having done some heirs units, is sometimes when you have too many studios, you don't get the number of seniors that you wanted, and then you have to deviate your program to something else. Maybe, of course, dealing with the other population that we're dealing with here. I'm sorry, I believe it's supportive housing. Excuse me. So it may deviate and go to supportive housing, and I think that it's critical for us to understand that and the community to understand that in case that happens.
Thank
All
you.
I have to say, thank you, Manny.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions, comments? Okay. All right. 1810 Randall Avenue. Thank you, Manny. We will bring this to a public hearing on Wednesday. Next, Ryan.
Sure. I do want to correct one thing for the commission on 23106 Northern Boulevard Commercial Overlay. Scott misspoke. The borough president voted to approve with conditions, not disapprove with conditions. Scott wanted me to correct that for the record. I will do that. But we can move on to the 9th item on the agenda, which is a pre-hearing review of a zoning map amendment in the Bronx Community District 12. I will further correct the record that it is 1959 Strang Avenue, not Strange, which we had written on our agenda. And Manny will, of course, present this one as well.
Okay, this is coming back also for pre-hearing review. Next item, please. The applicant is 1959 Sprang Avenue LLC, and they're requesting a zoning map amendment from R4 and R41 to R4C23. Next slide, please. The project area is located in the Baychester section of Community District 12 at the southeast portion of the block. That's lots 94 on block 4981. This block is predominantly 2 and 3 story 1 and 2 family homes, and the surrounding area consists of 2 and 3 family homes, the adjacent blocks. However, the block located to the south and across Strang Avenue is a commercial shopping center, zones C11 and C21. Next slide, please. The area map indicates that the project is in a predominantly residential area. The majority of the development site is within the R4 district, while a 10-foot sliver is within the R41 district. Next slide, please. This is a view of the development site facing southwest from Baychester Avenue. The site currently contains a 1-story vacant diner that was built in the 1930s. Next slide. The site plan indicates the proposed 1-story, approximately 3,600 square foot commercial building with 12 accessory parking spaces. The entrance to the parking area is via a curb cut on Baychester Avenue, and the exit is via a curb cut on Strang Avenue. Next slide, please. This slide shows the current and proposed zoning. The R4 is a residential zoning district that does not permit commercial or manufacturing uses. The applicant is therefore establishing a C23 commercial overlay, which is in the dotted area, to facilitate the construction of the commercial building. Next slide, please. And this is the rendering of what the building would look like. In the background to the left is the commercial shopping center that I mentioned previously. And to the left of that is the Eden Wall houses, which contain approximately 2,000 residential units. Next slide, please. This application was approved by Community Board number 12 by a vote of 26 in favor, 0 against, with 1 abstention, and it was approved by the Bronx Borough President. Are there any questions?
Questions from the commission?
I do have some information. If there aren't any questions, at the review session, the Bank of America, there was a question as to whether or not there was a lease, and there is a lease. A lease has been signed by Bank of America for a space in this 1-story building. Also, there was a question by the commission regarding a chain link fence, and the applicant has informed me that it's the drawing indicates both a chain link fence existing condition and a PCB fence is going to be the fence that they will provide. That stands for polyvinyl chloride, and it's a type of plastic. Are there any questions?
Okay, other questions on this? All right, seeing none, Manny, thank you very much. 1959 Strang Avenue will have a public hearing on Wednesday. Thank you for your work. And now we're going to go to a new borough, going to Manhattan.
That's right. So the 10th item on our agenda is a post-referral review of a renewal of a previously approved special permits and authorization in Manhattan Community District 4. And our presenter is Ariel B. Ariel?
Good afternoon, commissioners. This is a private application for the renewal of previously granted approvals in connection with the renovation and development at Piers 9294. Next slide. Piers 92 and 94 are in the west side of Manhattan in Community District 4. In 2009, the city approved a series of actions to facilitate the improvements of the piers as a venue for trade shows and exhibitions, as well as the development of new public access areas at the site. The applicant is seeking a renewal for a third 3-year term for the following approvals: a special permit to allow a trade exposition facility with capacity in excess of 2,500 persons, a special permit to modify maximum length and height of buildings and structures, and an authorization to modify waterfront public access requirements. This renewal would allow the operation of trade show and exhibition spaces and other as-of-right uses at the site, as well as the development of new waterfront and other public access areas. Next slide. A little bit of background on the actions that I discussed on the last slide. I noted that the CPC granted the approvals in 2009. The approvals went into effect in 2011 after legislation delays, when the applicant took possession of the site per end lease with EDC. Subsequently, the Commission approved 2 renewals in 2015 and 2018. While normally one can only seek 2 rounds of renewals, the applicant is eligible to seek a 3rd renewal pursuant to the recently adopted Zoning for Coastal Flood Resiliency Text Amendment, which provides relief in response to disasters such as Hurricane Sandy and the COVID-19 pandemic. The applicant cites damage from Hurricane Sandy, disruptions from the COVID-19 pandemic, and repairs to the Pier 92 pier shed as the major factors that have hindered construction. And it anticipates that it will be able to complete substantial construction before November 2024. Prior to this renewal, the applicant also brought to the DCP minor changes to the approved project. These changes relate to film studio use, building footprint, and internal configurations, and have been deemed by department staff to be substantially compliant with the original approvals and are incorporated as part of the renewal application. Separately, I will also note that beyond the application in front of the Commission, the applicant is also going through design review at the PDC and is engaging in lease negotiations with EDC. And given the property's adjacency to the Hudson River Park, there's also coordination with the Hudson River Park Trust. Next slide. Next, a bit more details on the development side of the proposed project. The site is generally bounded by Route 9A and the Hudson River Greenway to the east, the Hudson River to the west, the Clinton Cove Park, which is part of the Hudson River Park, to the north, and the prolongation of West 52nd Street to the south. It is in an M23 manufacturing zoning district, which has a maximum FAR of 2. It's also in a waterfront area, which has special regulations that apply to certain aspects of bulk and use. The eastern portion of the site consists of a head house building and a driveway that allows for passenger drop-off and truck unloading. Piers 92, 94, which make up the western portion of the site, are each developed with a pier shed building that connects into the head house. The site has mostly recently been used as a space for trade shows and exhibitions and as an overflow dock for passenger ships and boats. The roof of the Pier 92 pier shed has also been used for parking. There is currently no public access or open space on the piers, and Clinton Cove Park essentially dead ends into the head house. Next slide. This is a view of the head house and what used to be its loading docks. This is looking north from 12th Avenue. Next slide. This is a view of Pier 94 while facing southwest from Clinton Cove Park. And as I just mentioned, there is no waterfront access at the site today, and this project would add public walkways and seating areas around the northern part of the head house and around parts of Pier 94, significantly improving this condition. Next slide. And this is a view of the Pier 94 pier shed as seen from the Clinton Cove Park. Next slide. Zooming out of the development site itself, the surrounding area is characterized by a mix of industrial and commercial uses and open space. Directly east of the site is an M24 zoning district extending from 55th Street to 43rd Street between 11th Avenue and 12th Avenue. To the east of the M24 district is a mix of commercial and residential districts, primarily an R8 residential district. And to the northeast of the site is a mix of manufacturing and commercial districts. Immediately north of the project site is the Clinton Cove Park, operated by the Hudson River Park Trusts, which offers spaces for passive recreation as well as kayaking and water access at the Pier 96 boathouse. To the south of the project site are Piers 80 and 90, which together operates as a passenger ship terminal. To the east of the project site is the DeWitt Clinton Park. Next slide. Next, an overview of the original approvals from 2008. As some of the commissioners may recall, the CPC approved approximately 19,000 square feet of waterfront public access areas and 6,000 square feet of additional public access area at the site, shown in green on the site plan. The CPC also approved a total of 489,000 square feet of trade show and exhibition space. This includes space at Piers 92, 94, as well as an expanded second level at the head house. In addition, the approved project also included community amenity space and public restrooms at the northern end of the head house, shown in orange on the plan drawing. The proposed renewal, as updated by substantial compliance, includes film and TV studios, which is an as-of-right use in the M24 district, M23 district, and Pier 94 and the majority of the head house, and trade show and exhibition facility at Pier 92. It would also provide the same amount, configuration, and design of public access areas as approved in 2009. And as I noted earlier, the proposed Pier 94 pier shed and head house have also been redesigned for studio use to comply with resiliency standards. Next slide. This is a rendering of the proposed TV and film studios at the head house and Pier 94 and the surrounding public access areas. I will point out that the community space and public restrooms are at the northern end of the head house. You can also see the public access areas as part of the approvals along the waterfront, connected with the Clinton Cove Park. Beyond the scope of the land use application, the applicant is working on various other items around the site, including reconfiguring the area in front of the building entrance, which is on the east side of the head house, as well as traffic and bikeway improvements. These are part of PDC review and EDC lease negotiation, and many of these potential changes are also subject to state DOT approval. Next slide. This is a rendering of the Pier 94 pier shed, the public walkway surrounding it, and the seating area at the western end of the pier. Next slide. And this is a close-up rendering of the waterfront public access area connecting Pier 94 and the head house with Clinton Cove Park. Next slide. This renewal application was referred out to Community Board 4 for 45 days, and Community Board 4 issued its recommendation on June 1st. The Community Board is pleased that the applicant has identified an alternative use for Pier 94 and the head house. However, it recommends disapproval unless certain conditions are met. In brief, the Community Board would like the applicant to adhere to prior commitments, including providing the public amenity space, restrooms, and public walkway, implementing a traffic flow plan, and limiting signage regarding square footage and height. In addition, the Community Board also requests the applicant to incorporate additional recommendations to its proposal, as listed here on this slide. I would like to note that the renewal application's drawings, as previously approved, already includes the public amenity space and restrooms, as well as the exterior walkway, which is part of the waterfront public access area. The points related to traffic, signage, and greenway improvements are the applicant's prior commitments to the community in the lease, which is being renegotiated between the applicant and the EDC. According to the applicant, it intends to codify these commitments in new lease terms. And regarding the last point here relating to the maintenance of Pier 92, staff spoke with EDC, who confirmed that the city has always been responsible for the underside repairs and maintenance. And currently there are initial plans underway to repair the pile damages on Pier 92. And some of these other points listed here are also subject to PDC and state DOT review. In your briefing package, we included a point-by-point response letter from the applicant to the community board's requests. Next slide. And to summarize, the applicant is seeking the renewal of 2 special permits and 1 authorization to facilitate the operation of trade show facilities, film and TV studios, as well as the development of new public access areas. As a reminder, to grant the renewal, the commission shall find that the facts upon which the authorization or special permits were granted have not substantially changed. The applicant's statement of findings are included in your packages. This concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you, Ariel. Let's see if there are questions here. Mr. Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify, Ariel, upon completion of construction, will the tenant or the occupant continue to operate under this special permit that has 3-year terms in perpetuity, or at least at the discretion of the city, I suppose? Is that correct?
Yes, yes. So the renewal, this is a renewal for another 3-year term. Under.
But upon the completion of the construction, the special permit will be vested and they will have to operate pursuant to its requirements in perpetuity.
That's right.
It doesn't require renewal.
Oh, okay.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
it won't lapse every 3 years
No,
thereafter?
no,
Okay.
no, it has to, once it's vested, then it's just there.
That's right.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Commissioner Marin.
Thank you, Chair. Ariel, a question on the community access or community space. I see that in this overall development of, I don't know how many square feet, we have only 1,850 square feet for this community amenity. And there was also a discussion about providing public bathrooms. So I'm going to assume that the public bathrooms are not in the community amenity. So what is it that's envisioned to go into the community amenity space for the community?
Yeah, so I think the 1,800, did you just say 1,800 square feet of community amenity space?
One of the plans that you put up, 1850.
Plan, 1850.
Yeah, if you go to the rendering where there are identifiers of what spaces are, it actually says community space,
yes,
and it has 1850.
Right. That's right. Yeah, 1850 square feet of public space. I will look into what goes on in the interior of that community amenity space and get back to you, Commissioner. But then there's also an outdoor component to that community space. As you can see in this rendering, there's like this trellis structure that provides shade and also functions as a little stage for small scale concerts.
Hi, this is Stephen Johnson. So I just wanted to add the indoor space is meant to be used by anyone in the community who wants to use it. So it's open to people. I'm not sure if there's going to be some sort of sign-in system for it, but it is meant to be an indoor space that is being able to be used by members of the community.
That's right. Yeah, it's a public space. Yes.
Going to program and monitor.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I seem to have been on mute. So my question was, if this is a community space that's going to be used as you identify it, who is going to program and schedule the functions within that building, within that portion of the building? Excuse me.
This is something that I can look into and get back to you.
That's fine. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
And that would be it for me. So thank you. Yes, thank you.
Great. Okay, other questions here? I will note again, this is, I will be asking for a voice vote here to send an approval letter to the buildings department. And what we are assenting to is that the facts on which the initial special permits were granted have not substantially changed. So I will just flag that for everybody. So there may be additional questions, and Ariel will surely get back to you on those. But what I'm going to seek a vote on is whether the facts and circumstances here have changed. And the department's view is that they have not. So before I go to a vote on that, or an assent on that, is there any other question on this? Okay. All right. So I will seek an assent by voice vote to send an approval letter to the buildings department here. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. All right. We have assent. Let's go to the next one, Ryan.
Great. So actually I'll call the 11th and 12th item together. So these items are post-referral review of City Planning Commission certifications that no transit easement is necessary. And this is at 1357 2nd Avenue and 300 East 83rd Street. There are materials in your package. Staff is here to answer any questions. And the MTA has indicated that no transit easement is necessary at either location. So if there's any questions, let us know.
Any questions from the commission? Okay, Ryan, can I do a dual assent?
Yeah, you can do the dual
Okay,
assent on.
Great. Let me just give a second to make sure there's no questions. Seeing none. Okay, we're going to do 11 and 12 together. So I'm going to seek assent by voice vote to send a letter to the buildings department certifying that no easement is necessary on either 1357 2nd Avenue or 300 East 83rd Street. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Okay, we have assent. Ryan, future votes.
Yeah, so for June 8th, staff have prepared reports in support of the following. So we have the Brooklyn CB17 office space. This is 350 Clarkson Avenue, and Lucia Cappuccio is here to discuss the department's position. Lucia?
Good afternoon, commissioners. I'm covering for
Oh,
Lucia.
that's
today.
right, Lorenza.
Yeah, no problem. So the
Please.
Department of City Planning supports the Department of Citywide Administrative Services and Brooklyn Community Board 17's application to relocate the community board's office to its appropriate location at 350 Clarkson Avenue. Thank you.
Thanks.
Moving on to 41 Summit Street, Jonah Rogoff is here to discuss. Jonah.
Hi, good afternoon, commissioners. So the department would like to express its support for the 41 Summit Street application. Again, this is a proposed M11 to R6B in the Columbia Street waterfront area of Brooklyn. The rezoning boundary would just extend 30 feet. So it's a relatively modest amount, and it would be extending kind of the existing character, which is predominant along that block, being residential. And so, yes, we support it and happy to kind of elaborate further or take any questions.
Okay.
Thanks, Jonah.
Right. Thank you, Jonah.
11th Street and 34th Avenue rezoning, Joy Racer.
Hi, good afternoon, commissioners. DCP has prepared a report in favor of the proposed 11th Street and 34th Avenue rezoning. The application would facilitate development that achieves the goals of the Ravenswood framework by creating a new mixed-use development on an underutilized site. The development would produce around 350 community-serving jobs to a wide range of workers, including nearby NYCHA residents, through the creation of 2 new trade schools, a food production facility, artist studios, office space, and retail. In addition, the development would also generate 352 new apartment units, including 88 to 105 permanently affordable units pursuant to MIH. And the creation of a new mixed-use district in Northwest Ravenswood would allow for higher floor-to-ceiling heights on ground floors in the development that would permit building envelope that can accommodate ground floor industrial and commercial uses, but will still maintain the mid-density character of residents to the west of 11th Street. The department recommends that the commission vote in favor of the proposed actions for the 11th Street and 34th Avenue rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you, Joy.
Joy, so we will keep you on because you have Weatherall Street and 67th Avenue rezoning as well.
Yes. So DCP has proposed a report also in favor of the proposed Weatherall Street and 67th Avenue rezoning. The contextual zoning established in the Forest Hills Regal Park rezoning in 2002 was an attempt to align the zoning with existing built context. The zoning approved by the commission aimed to serve this main objective across the rezoning area. 20 years have passed and new considerations are being brought to the commission that are site-specific in nature. While predictability and consistency are important to supporting investment, zoning must also be adaptable to the changing needs of a dynamic city. The commission's consideration of an application should be informed by previous decisions, but it's wholly within the commission's purview to reconsider and update zoning in the context of the current needs of the city, borough, and neighborhood. The population of Community District 6 has increased by 6.8% over the past decade, but the number of housing units produced has only increased by 2.5%. The community board was heavily involved in the 2002 rezoning and still voted in favor of the application, citing a need for new, sustainable, and affordable housing in a neighborhood that is wealthier than the citywide average. To summarize, the application will facilitate an updated land use approach that is responsive to the neighborhood's need for new housing. And so the department recommends that the commission vote in favor of the proposed action. Thank you.
Thank you, Joy.
Thanks, Joy. And rounding out the Queen's votes, 7739 Bly Place rezoning. Scott.
Good afternoon again. So the department prepared a report that supports VP Capital Holdings' proposal for a zoning map amendment from R32 C12 to R6A C23 and designate MIH to facilitate 119 homes, 36 affordable, and 18,000 square feet of ground floor retail. R6A density to be appropriate for this location and which would help meet the growing needs for housing production in the city, in addition to support the growth of local commercial and facility uses. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Scott. For the Delafield Estates, this was discussed the last review session, and staff believe that all the findings have been met and recommend approval of this application. The Lirio, Andy Cantu is here with discussion. He has a little more in-depth discussion. Andy.
Thanks, Ryan. Good afternoon, commissioners. Just before I get to staff's recommendation, just want to follow up with some additional info since last review session. Just want to report that based on feedback from the community board, DCP is recommending that the commission modify the proposed zoning text amendment to reflect some of CB4's proposed language. This change would make it even more explicit that the special permit waivers to lot coverage and yard regulations would only apply to the MTA and the DEP sites. So rather than defining the applicable sites as containing existing public infrastructure, the text would now specify that the lot contain a mass transit or water supply support facility. And this is the third condition for the special permit, in addition to the requirements that the zoning lot is at least 40,000 square feet and fronts on a wide street. And I believe I prepared a memo that's in your briefing packet that summarizes this change. I also want to respond to a question that we received related to the community's claim that a disproportionate amount of extremely low and very low income units have been developed within CB4 recently. Based on information provided by HPD, since 2014, when Housing New York was unveiled, approximately 1,954 units of affordable housing at income bands up to 165% of AMI have been developed or preserved within CB4. Over that same period, about 3,039 units of market rate housing were developed. So in total, about 5,000 units total. So of those 5,000 units developed in CB4 over the past 8 years, less than 9% were extremely low or very low income units below 50% AMI. So while CB4 has certainly absorbed its share of extremely low and very low income units, the district has seen a proportionate amount of moderate income and market rate units as well. So also to put these numbers within its proper demographic context, as a percent of total population, CB4 has fewer households earning below 100% of AMI and more households above 100% of AMI compared with Manhattan or New York City as a whole. And so finally, staff prepared a CPC report in support of this application. We'd like to offer DCP's staff's full-throated support for this project. thereto will deliver 111 units of desperately needed supportive and affordable housing in a high opportunity transit-rich neighborhood. The 67 supportive housing units will house individuals and families who have historically been under-resourced and marginalized, including those experiencing homelessness and those living with HIV and AIDS. The actions that you will vote on this Wednesday will facilitate a development that will affirmatively further fair housing and foster more inclusive communities. This is an exceedingly rare opportunity to leverage an underutilized publicly owned site to not only support the city's affordable housing goals, but also to expand a critically important piece of transit infrastructure, thus conserving scarce public funds, and also reinvigorate a long desolate stretch of 9th Avenue with new retail and pedestrian activity. While the department understands the community board's strong desire to avoid a precedent-setting change to the Special Clinton District's preservation area zoning, we believe zoning amendments, including changes to special district regulations, are common and necessary to address unique conditions and accommodate change. Staff views the proposal as a carefully defined, rational change that is needed to help zoning evolve to meet the needs of today. The department considers the actions to be targeted and appropriate and recommends approval. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Oh, we have a question.
Oh, let's see. Okay, Commissioner Levin.
Not a question, but really a comment. Thank you, Andy, for a thorough presentation. I think the presentation of information about low-income housing generated in this community district needs to go back before 2014, because the big burst of development was 80-20 development in the first 15 years of the century. In other words, after 2000 up to about 2014. So you're quite right that since 2014, the balance of market rate and affordable housing has been at exactly as you described it, but that overlays on top of significant development of low-income housing in the period before. And I think that's probably part of the calculation that Board 4 makes in asserting their view of reality. It doesn't change the overall conclusion of your recommendation, but thank you.
That's really fair. Thanks for providing that context.
Thank you, Commissioner. Ryan?
Yeah, so moving on, we have the theater subdistrict CAPA rule change. Ezra just has some updates.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon. I mean, I'd start by saying that DCP supports the adjustment via CAPA. I did just want to notify the commission of resolutions that came in. Well, it was in the form of written testimony following public hearing from May 25th. So after the hearing, we received testimony from Community Board 4, Community Board 5, and the borough president. And because this is a CAPA process, these aren't formal resolutions, but you know that it was the opportunity for the community board and borough president to weigh in. So I just note that all three called upon DCP to reevaluate and overhaul the way contributions for the theater subdistrict fund are calculated via text amendment. And a number of these, the testimonies cited the 2016 withdrawn text amendment. Community Board 4 supported the adjustment, but suggested that the Department of City Planning used 2019 DOF data, which would reflect pre-COVID conditions in order to capture a pre-pandemic snapshot of the value of these development rights. But DCP discussed this internally, and it's not permitted under zoning to do this. Community Board 5 recommended a denial unless the contribution were doubled to $50 a square foot. Just to jog everyone's memory, it's being proposed to be adjusted to $24.65 a square foot. So CB5 recommended be doubled to 50 a square foot, and they requested that Community Board 5 be appointed a position on the Theater Subdistrict Council. The borough president supported the adjustment, but also called for changes to the methodology similar to those from the 2016 text amendment. So happy to answer any questions on it, but I just wanted to present this information to the commission.
Thank you, Ezra.
Right. For 41 Highland Avenue and 4187 Richmond Avenue, staff believe that the findings for these special South Richmond district certifications have been met and are recommending approval. We have finally a resolution concerning the continued suspension of in-person commission meetings. I want to carefully distinguish this from the resolution to hold the in-person remote hybrid meetings for which the commission held a hearing on May 25th, which will be scheduled for a vote at a later date. This resolution, which is for a vote on Wednesday, reflects a determination by the commission that the circumstances necessitating the state and city declarations of a state of emergency due to COVID-19 affect or impair the ability of the commission to hold in-person public meetings. It will continue to hold remote meetings contingent on such emergency declarations until September 22nd, 2022. Are there any questions on that? Great. All right. And then finally, we have our post-hearing follow-up, which is that the only thing we have is the proposed commission resolution concerning the use of video conferencing to conduct commission meetings. This resolution would permit the in-person remote hybrid meetings. And just to update that the department has not received any testimony on this resolution, and we will schedule a vote for this at a later date.
Great. Thank you, Ryan. Is there anything else for today?
There's no further items on our agenda for today.
Okay, well, that was productive, everyone. Thank you all, and we will see you on Wednesday morning. Thanks to the commission, thanks to the staff here at the Department of City Planning, and for the applicants at issue. We'll see you on Wednesday, and thanks everybody for your time. See you soon.
Bye.